Welcome to my 19th anniversary of my reading conferences. Number 19, 20 next year will be my last year of doing this. So pass it on to your friends and that if they're looking for a good way to get graduate credit, to learn a lot of simple strategies. Next year will be the last year, but really looking forward to it. Welcome to the Pearson Lakes Arts Center and the Lawrenson Performing Arts Theater. I need to do a little advertising before we get started here. And I left these on your table here, and that we have so many fun things going on for all ages, all abilities, all incomes. First of all, coming to the Arts Center, it's free, 12 months a year. The theater this year, the performances, I had told you in one of the benefits of coming to the in-person, you could get discounted tickets for the concert tonight. Well, we are completely sold out tonight. But if any of you were planning on going, we can put a chair in the back for you, and it's the best seat in the house anyway. So far this year, we've had 4 performances. All 4 have been completely sold out. And many of our concerts the rest of the year are sold out, and we've added a second night to a lot of them. So make sure you look at different brochures and that, and hopefully we can get you back up here. I know some of you traveled away, so if you're not here for a long time with your family, when you come back up on vacation, make sure you stop in. So, reading conference, started this 19 years ago, and the reason why I started it, I had been principal. I was lucky enough to be selected principal of the year, but I was also the head of the Iowa Reading Association, so I was responsible for putting on the conference in Des Moines. And when we had it in Des Moines, we brought in some great presenters. We had Tommy DePaula, we had Regi Routman, and the list went on and on. I mean, we had some outstanding, and we had 1,500 people at the conference. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And a few years later, I thought, instead of teachers having staff development where you go to a classroom someplace, and I thought, well, I'm going to start doing this. My first year, just did a few local presenters, and I think I had 38 people at my first conference. And really enjoyed it, and over time it kept expanding. So at the time when things were really going well, I would start in Sioux City for 2 days, come to Okoboji for 2 days, go to Iowa City for 2 days, then Decorah for 2 days, and then down to Council Bluffs for 2 days. And in Okoboji, the biggest conference we had 125 people in a room over at Village West. And it was one of those days, the air conditioning wasn't working, it was terribly hot, they were mowing outside. Thank goodness everybody had their deodorant on, because it would have been like one big armpit. But everybody had fun, and they enjoyed it. In fact, Troy and Lisa both had the opportunity to present over there during those days. So then COVID hit, and things have changed. Instead of having 125 people in person, we have a small, intimate number of people in person, and everybody loves to do it virtually. And so we're glad we have a few people here to do it in person. That helps out for the presenters. And I think we're going to have the opportunity to have some great interaction here. So not only will you be learning from the presenters, but I'm sure the feedback and the questioning, and that's going to help them become better at what they do too. And again, the idea behind the whole conference was having teachers who are out there in the field doing practical things. You're not going to hear any theory, that you have to go back and investigate. You're going to hear practical strategies that if you went back to the classroom tomorrow, you could use. So this day we will have Troy and Jenny from Spencer. This afternoon we're going to have Lisa. And Lisa's was one of my lead teachers in Spencer as well, and I was blessed in Spencer the 10 years I was there. I had great people to work with. And then tomorrow you'll hear Tricia Duncan or Patty Duncan. She's a consultant from Oregon. And then in the afternoon, we'll finish it off with Annie Winston, and she's an author from on the West Coast as well. So a little variety. Try to, again, we're looking for you to pick up a few strategies that will help you become better teachers. And that, I'm looking out here, and I do need to share. I mean, I love, now most of you are probably so young you don't even remember who Satchel Paige was. Satchel Paige was a baseball player. He was a black baseball player that didn't get to play in the major leagues because he was black. And I think he was like 70 years old, and they let him play for the Kansas City A's so he could be the oldest baseball player to ever pitch in the major leagues. His saying was, if you didn't know how old you were, how old would you be? And I guess to me, that's who I am. I'm not 72 years old, but I started feeling it today a little bit when these two young ladies came in over here. Jenny was in elementary school, I think about 4th grade, when I became principal down in Dunlap. And we were talking that how she's been here a few years ago with her kids. Now that's aging me a little bit.
My kids are all grown up.
No, you didn't have to add that. But no, it's great to see, people that and a lot of you have been at my conferences before, so I appreciate you being here. Things really haven't changed a lot with the requirements. Over the 20 years, we've worked with a lot of different colleges for the graduate credit. Some of them became that they were too expensive. Some we changed from because the requirements. Some of the colleges, besides spending your time here, you had to spend another 16 hours outside of this before we could give you your graduate credit. So we are now currently working with the University of Sioux Falls, and you do have to sign up separately with the University of Sioux Falls, and we will be getting you that link if you haven't done so already. Okay, the requirements for the graduate credit. We like the KISS method. Keep it simple. Okay, and you have this sheet. I think there's 5 spots on here to record. There's only 4 presenters, but we just use the generic form the same every year. So each presenter, you just write down a couple practical things, a couple strategies that stood out that you definitely want to remember. Now, with the tablets you have, I'm sure you're going to be taking a lot more notes than what you're going to write on here. But you only have to put a couple things on this here for each of the presenters. Then at the end of the conference, you need to write an implementation plan. So you take one of the strategies you've heard here in the 2 days and write up how you're going to use it when you go back in the classroom in the fall. Again, keep it simple. It doesn't have to be an education ease. It's not like a term paper. It's really to help you when you go back in the fall. So, but it's also a requirement that, we have to require the work of you as well. So it's really to help us both out. It gives me the opportunity to give you a grade, and it also, hopefully, then will help you remember what you're going to do when you go back in the fall. So, any questions about anything here so far? We've already filled out your menus, so when we're finished up here, I will go get the food ordered. We'll take a break in the morning. Troy and Janny will present for a while. We'll take a break. Then they'll finish up at noon. We'll eat. This afternoon, Lisa, she'll be presenting. And same thing in the middle of the afternoon. We'll take a break. Sometime later this afternoon, Laurel Canyon will be upstairs doing sound checks and that. So you may get entertained with a little music here as well in the afternoon. So I'm going to start it off like I do every other year for 19 years, and why stop now? To me, the world of reading is magical. A world without reading is kind of like this coloring book. It's empty. And what I try to do is bring presenters in to give you practical strategies when you go back to the classroom that you can use. Of course, those practical strategies really just kind of give the framework to the written word. And this year, we're trying to, one of the theme is how to inspire the unmotivated reader. So, we're going to learn how to put color to the written word here these few days. And again, that's with the inspiration and that you're going to hear from our presenters today. So again, welcome. Enjoy your time here, and I appreciate you being here. Now, let's give Troy and Jenny a big welcome here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, just like Bob said, we are here to hopefully give you some practical, easy to use. Whenever I go to presentations, all I want is give me something to bring back to the classroom. So that's our goal today.
And even with this, it is interactive. So after each session, and she'll go over the objectives and stuff that we're doing, there'll be a share out where after fluency, after the word work, and after the comprehension. So if you have ideas, put it on there, because it's gotten so complicated to teach reading, and it is a science. And if there's something that you're doing that's working in your district, we want it written down as well so we can brainstorm. What we won't do today is we're probably not going to go over our reading series that we're using, because what we're using is working for us. We make a lot of decisions on data. We won't go into specifics on what's going on in Spencer. That's all confidential. So,
Okay. So kind of some background on us. Go ahead, Troy.
well, both of us have taught a long time. I've taught fourth grade for 20 years, and presently I'm a reading and math interventionist and a counselor at Johnson's. I'm a work with reading and math at Lincoln, and then I'm a counselor in the morning with preschoolers and kindergartners. And I've always had a fascination with reading. Reading wasn't hard for me, and I'm sure it wasn't hard for you either. And so when we get to this point where, like, you can't read and you're in fourth or fifth grade, what happened? Maybe it was instruction, maybe it wasn't. And so I have a fascination with this. And so when they approached us to do what we're doing, I signed up right away for it.
And this is my 16th year in education. I've either been fourth grade or third grade, and then we'll be starting our third year in interventions this coming school year. Mm-hmm. So I specifically work with third grade, but we've kind of edited it so that I can pull in other grade levels as well. So why does our district choose to have interventionists? COVID was the big kicker there. Actually, before COVID, we talked about having an interventionist, and then I was set to become the interventionist, and we had masks, we wanted smaller class sizes, so I was put back in the classroom. So it didn't work out right away, but that was kind of the main reason. And then my personal experience was in 2021 when I started being the interventionist, that third grade class that we had gotten, so they had missed the end of first grade, masked throughout second grade. And so we got this group of third graders, and we were like, what in the world? I have never taught things that I have to teach now, as I'm sure some of you are finding out as well. So I think a lot of the interventionists have come from realizing that we have some reading issues because of COVID and because of factors outside of the school, like you all know.
I taught language arts. I had 2 sections of it in our building, and I've always been comfortable with reading and writing. It's not a big deal. And then a group of students that I had were struggling, and we, at that time period, were using basically a reading workshop, because kids don't need to learn how to read in fourth grade. And there were so many problems all around that, like, even the books, it started off with not having the right types of books for them to read. They were not low enough. They were not the right grade level. It started with not being able to silent read. You know, like when you think of kindergarten and first graders, they read to themselves. So there was a lot of that going on. So my last year of teaching, I was questioning a lot of things, that this is no longer working. And then COVID hit.
And then with this third grade class, I worked really closely with the AEA, and she was giving me like a prescriptive plan to do with students, and me not even knowing that I was doing this science of reading. Like, she's telling me how to do the, word parts and manipulating sounds and not even knowing anything about science of reading. I've never even heard the phrase. And then kind of in the last couple years realizing that, this is a whole new train of thought. So,
and a compliment around what she just said. I did know a little bit about it, but I was doing it all in isolation and I was gaining nothing. So if I did some word work, there was no text that even matched what we were doing. If I did any dictation, it didn't match what and it was doing, so it was like a hot mess.
So before we go on, we were going to just ask these courts. I don't even know where I am. We were just going to ask what grade levels you guys teach, if you want to introduce yourself, so then we kind of have a feel for the audience.
Julie Malone, and I teach 5th grade.
5th grade, okay.
Jenny Puck and 5th grade. Yeah. Shelley Vandenberg, 3rd grade.
Okay.
Megan Miller, 1st grade.
Lori McGuire, taught kindergarten. This year I taught 2nd, and next year I'll teach 1st.
Okay.
Heidi Larson, I teach 3rd grade. Lisa Elliott, I taught 2nd grade for 30 years, and kindergarten for 2.
So you primary teachers you have been my go-to. I have gone to the kindergarten, 1st grade teachers and are like, how do you teach this? How do you, use your mouth to show how to say sounds? So you guys have it going on. So this is the whole idea of the science of reading, the 3 parts of the simple view of reading. And what stuck out to me when we started learning about it is when you do 0 times 1, you always get 0. So you can't have one without the other to get that reading comprehension. Mm-hmm. So that word recognition that Troy and I were not used to teaching before these last couple of years, that's what we've had to learn how to do. And we've had to self-learn a lot, more than I ever have, and to be able to get to that reading comprehension.
And it is funny when she says self-taught. We've worked a lot with the AEA, just like, I don't know what to do. I don't even know what this means. And even like, I finished up both volumes for the letters training, and I would still have to go to my speech therapist. What are you talking about? Where are these sounds coming from? What do you mean it's got to do with the lobes? Or you want me to do what? There's just the vowels. Why do I have to worry about how their mouth is shaped? What do you want me to use a mirror for? And it's like, that didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
I'll share a podcast with you at the end, but something that's really stuck out to me, they were talking about now teachers have to relearn how to teach reading. And the frustrations that teachers are having right now, because, oh my gosh, when we were in college, we learned how to do guided reading groups and how to ask those comprehension questions. And now it's a whole new ball game, and we're having to learn it ourselves. And even college students coming out of college right now aren't getting the science of reading. So, it's just an interesting time in our reading.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, this is going to be interactive, and I want it to have some benefits. So if you could do me a favor, can you take out in your packet, you have something called the fluency rubric, and you have what's going to be our mentor text, which is going to be Neil Armstrong, and I want to do just a little experiment. So when I first started teaching in Iowa, there were no, and a lot of you guys know this already, there were no benchmarks. Iowa was one of the only states that did not have benchmarks and standards. So when everything started moving forward to this is what you need to be doing for fluency, this is what you need to be doing for comprehension, that was all new to me. So many years ago, when the benchmark for 4th grade was 103 words by the end of the year, now it's 147. I thought you had to focus on speed. And come on, we got to go. Let's roll. And yeah, some of the kids really did make gains, but there was always a large group, like kids that might have had processing problems, executive functioning, maybe IEPs, maybe tracking. It's not working for them. And it doesn't matter if I read that same passage every day and I modeled it and I had parent volunteers come in and I had my associates or I had small group, they weren't gaining. So I had to step backwards a little bit and kind of get my ducks in a row. So with this fluency rubric, I discovered that speed isn't going to increase anything unless you focus on one of those facets in reading. And reading is more than speed. I mean, I don't know anyone that's ever given a presentation and said, great, you did awesome because you read 147 words per minute. So when I started taking a step backwards, I started focusing on one aspect on that rubric. And one of the biggest things on it that I had good luck with, and I'm hoping that you'll participate with that, is looking at punctuation. So I want you to take out Neil Armstrong. And you can whisper read it to yourself. But when I had kids start to look at what fluency actually is, something as simple as punctuation, with you stopping at the end of this period to focus, their fluency actually increased. And the other thing that ended up happening with it was smoothness. And I always remember that you had that kid that they made the benchmark, but they sounded like a robot, or they had these hiccups is what I go, as a reading. I thought, what in the world are we doing? This is insane. So if I could just time you for 1 minute, and you can kind of whisper read it and we'll get the gist of it. Focusing on the aspect of punctuation off of that, which is when you're a smooth reader, I use punctuation to make phrases. I breathe. Could you try that for me and just see how you do to yourself? How many words you got? And I know you're adults, but 4th and 5th graders, they're going to get about the same amount of words per minute if they focus on this punctuation or any of these aspects like accuracy, expression, smoothness, pace, if they just focus on that and less on speed. So I'm just going to time you, do it to yourself or whatever you're comfortable with doing. You may go and stop. So I want you to kind of think to yourself what number you got. And I want you to think about, by slowing down and focusing on punctuation, would you have made the benchmark of 147 if you were at the end of 4th grade? Did you track with your eyes? Were you accurate? I never worried about accuracy in 4th grade. Why would I? Until I started looking at what she's going to introduce, is what you know about FastBridge. I about died when I looked at my data and I thought, what do you mean you're at 91%? How many words did you actually miss? Why are you missing these? Are you pronouncing them correctly? I never once thought of it because I only thought of speed.
So I love focusing on something other than the speed, because I know, and you guys have probably seen your kids doing their time tests, and like I actually had kids go, tell me when to go. And I just hate that. So putting the focus somewhere else is a great idea, Troy. So all of you do FastBridge for your progress monitoring and your diagnostics. There's a lot on FastBridge that I was thinking, being outside of the classroom has given us the unique opportunity to spend our time elsewhere. Like, I'm not sitting down emailing parents about behaviors, so I always tell the teachers that, like, I have the time to do stuff like this, so I've been able to dig a little bit into FastBridge. And I don't know if any of you use any of the interventions on FastBridge, but after you do your initial screening, there's the screening to intervention report that you can pull up, and it's just under reporting, and it gives you exactly a prescriptive plan for that child. So I know I had readers that when I did the CBM and I pulled it up, their plan was 1.2, which is a first grade, second month plan. And so that kind of guided me, okay, we're really needing to go back. And if I clicked on that plan, it would show me phonics or word recognition or letter sounds, something as simple as that. So then you're able to fill in those holes. But this is a great resource.
And if you look at what she has up there, the screening to intervention report gives you specific plans. You can also group with them as well. So it's one less thing you have to do, and that's what she did.
So for our fluency, I just make fluency folders, and this is another resource on FastBridge. How many of you have used the interventions on FastBridge? Okay. So they have on FastBridge, and I can show you how to get to them, they have the grade level passages, and I just made these folders, and we do this kind of protocol to do the fluency. I read it first so that they can see me reading with punctuation and me pausing and me breathing. And then they do their cold read, see how far they can get So they look at their numbers. I have them numbered. And then they read with me, so they try and keep at that pace. They have time to practice out loud. They go off to their own spot. And then they do a hot read. And then one of the biggest things that the AEA really wanted me to do with the kids was have them graph. So they take accountability for, okay, this week I read 50 words per minute, but oh my gosh, look, next time I read 60 words per minute. And I think that has motivated them by graphing it themselves and seeing that progress, or seeing, oh my gosh, I dropped 15 words. And then we can talk about your fluency is not going to stay and it's not going to get higher every time, but what did you do differently this time, or what was different that maybe your score got lower?
I did something very similar, but I made a mistake. I look at all of our data for our grade level, and so I would have the kids graph with me because the teachers are super busy. So every Friday when I'd run a report to see how they did on progress monitoring, I put the data in all their mailboxes. So we have 7 sections of 4th grade, and there was some 5th grade that I progress monitored as well. So then I did what she said. We graphed together. And then I'm sitting there thinking, I'll get the data to the teachers, but maybe the teachers should be sitting side by side with them so they're quite aware of what's going on, because you know as well as I do, once you're teaching math, reading, science, social studies, specials, and maybe you have to participate in a couple after-school activities, you're not really looking at that data but 3 times a year. But if that data is in your face and you are graphing with those kids and you send it home and have a parent sign it, or through Seesaw or whatever, now you've got some skin in the game. And so when you come to the conference and mom and dad are shocked that they're at this, you can't be shocked because that graph went home. You as a teacher know who is more at risk and who's not faking it.
How many kids do you do that with at a time?
So I usually have groups of 6 or less.
Okay.
Yep. But we do have teachers that do a whole class fluency similar to this because their whole class is lower. So it's possible too.
We did that this year for our win time, and my group was 6. So I was just curious.
Yep.
as to-
Yeah, that's a good number to do it with.
And you can train your kids with, like you said, with partners,
Absolutely.
and they love doing that.
Yes. And they can run the timer and they can graph themselves.
In lower
And
grades, some classes I would say we just need a knee, and then I would do the timing.
Yes,
because
right.
They couldn't handle it.
imagine that.
Just to be honest with people sometimes.
And I do mark the goal based on the we're in trimesters, so if it's first trimester, the goal is 90 words per minute. So then they can see, and that was another thing the AEA highly suggested, they need to be able to see the target, where the target is, where they're headed, where they are in relationship to that target. And then that parent communication piece is huge. So this is actually the graph I use in my classroom, and they graph it and we send a picture on Seesaw. That's our form of communication that we use. And then I was amazed by the feedback from the parents that they were actually looking at it and they would make comments. I'm like, oh, they are taking, you just have to give them the chance to take ownership of their child's learning.
And I think with life being busy, I don't think they knew.
Right.
And what do those numbers mean? I mean, if you don't go over it. And the other thing, and I had to have help with it, we have quite a few kids that run through our rooms, but there were 7 that I was very concerned about. And I didn't know how to break it down even more. So I had the AA help me with what should they be getting each week? How many words growth? Like, is it 1.3? Is that how many words growth
Yep.
they should be getting each week? What is realistic? And so that broke it down as well, because you know as well as I do, there's going to be some kids that will never hit it. But you need to celebrate because you are working your behind off and you are hitting what you should be going. And so you need to celebrate.
For you with those little ones, like I love your graph, Jenny, but for
Yeah.
small little kids, five words is a lot. Sometimes so make your graph to fit your
That's a great
age
point.
level too.
Yep.
So they get excited that they did 2 words better,
Right.
1 word better. Ooh,
Absolutely.
Well, and that's interesting because that's one thing that they've switched. That's moving more to first grade, because like what we do in kindergarten is we focus on how many sounds. So like that, they're really celebrating like that you had this many sounds, because like what is it, 52? I think by the end of the year is the benchmark for that, is what they're looking at, that celebrate that you're hitting that. couple things for your toolbox as well, like just some easy things. Read naturally. I didn't know that went back down to 8/10, and that's something that's been around 100 years. I mean, it's easy, but that 8/10 didn't mean anything to me until we took some of the letters training, and it showed me what they're focusing on because we did have a couple of kids in 4th grade that were at an 8/10 level, and it was working on different sounds as well. I also like read naturally for another reason, echo reading, which I sometimes forget because once again I'm focusing on speed, which didn't make a lot of sense at the time. So we really hit that hard when we do read naturally, that you are, like what Jenny said, I'm reading it, you're reading it, or we're reading it together to get that going a little bit. 6-minute solution. That's another strategy that I use as well, but I use it differently. If you have a classroom and you look at your fast bridge and you have a standard deviation on your fast bridge and it's a double digit, that means that you need a whole group fluency and probably a whole group comprehension. So this is okay, the read naturally, it's fine for small group, but my last couple of years that I was teaching language arts, I took science and social studies texts, so they were getting some bang for their buck, and that's what we were using. So like if my teaching partner was teaching science, we found text that was manageable for what they could read, and we did a whole group. And the fluency intervention that we did whole group was 6-minute solution. You don't have all day to do this, so we took 6 minutes. 1, set up. 2, partner read. 1, the first person is going to partner read. Graph it. 3rd minute, go ahead and have the second person read it. 4th, just so and so like that. Those 6 steps, and we used the cafe model, if you've heard of that, where like you start with the whole group, you tell them exactly what you're doing. This is how it should look. Go to your stations. We have 6 minutes to get this going. Oops, nope. Everybody back up front. You're not moving. This is taking 11 to 12 minutes. And it was one thing that I could get into my whole group comprehension, whole group fluency to support my language arts.
Oh, sorry, Troy.
It's all right.
There it is.
But those are just the steps.
Go ahead, you do press.
Okay. Press was something that was new to me. Dr. Jill does eye therapy, and I was fortunate enough to teach in Hartley Melvin Sanborn when she was just starting out in optical school. And this is in the 90s. And so no one knew what she was talking about. She'd come to school, I taught with her mom, and she'd be telling us all this stuff about tracking and the dangers of computer, and we thought, yeah, whatever. She was right. So one of the things that I learned about eye tracking is you have to practice. Those kids that go to eye therapy are practicing. They're doing homework at home to practice tracking with their eyes. Press is one simple strategy that you can do that you're going to think I'm crazy, but it really works for helping kids to track. Never before would I ever encourage kids in 4th and 5th grade to use your finger underneath the words. But if I don't, it's way off. So we need to figure out a strategy to get them to better track with their eyes. Press is one of them. If you could partner up with someone, and we'll just practice it for like 30 seconds, we're going to practice the strategy of press. And if you could use your mentor text, once again, Neil Armstrong, we'll show you what we're going to do. With press, if you two are partnering up, you read the first word, you read the second, over and over and over. And it sounds redundant, and the kids don't always like it, but it is strengthening those eyes because there is something with technology or their phones or whatever, it's affecting how they're reading, and it's scary.
How far do you go in a passage with that?
I only do a minute, and then I have them switch roles. If you're number 1, you're number 2, then you're going to switch. And there's probably 1,000 different ways to do this, but I wasn't even aware that that was an issue until I listened to them read through that fast bridge, and it's like, what are you doing? I mean, you just skipped 2 whole lines. What are you doing? And no, I know, and I wouldn't do this all the time. Like if I did press, I would do it a week, then I'd maybe go to the 6-minute solution during the whole group, then I'd go to read naturally, and then I'd go to poetry. Because it is hard, but I've never ever had it where, and you guys as well, where we're struggling with tracking in 4th grade. There should be no fingers underneath the words by the time you get 4th grade, but that's not what's happening. So if you could practice just with someone just to kind of get the feel for it, it's not easy. And we'll only do like 30 seconds if you're okay with that. Whenever you're ready, decide who's person 1 and go.
It is awkward.
This?
Doing every other word. It's awkward if you're not used to it.
It came directly from her, and it's like, I didn't even know what she's talking about, because she'd always come in and poo-poo us because the kids are on the computer. They were on the Apple computers, those green ones, and it's like, she just was fascinated by it, and it's like, it's true, and that's the work that they're doing. And stop. That's right enough on that one. It's not easy. It's not easy. But you guys were successful. But like I said, you don't want to overdo it. But it's something that you need to keep in mind. Like, we did the Sabres with the littles at where I work with kids for preschool and kindergarten. And I think another reason why I support Press, they were telling us how long, because we would interview them because they weren't able to touch the screens themselves in preschool, how long the 4 and 5-year-olds were on their phones. Well, first of all, how'd you get a phone? And second of all, what do you mean? So like those lights, I don't know, the images, the blurbs, something has to be affecting their tracking. And if you're already on it at 4 years old, by the time you get to me, it's like, there's trouble. So that's just one more tool that we've used to help out.
Something similar too is like if you're reading something out loud for your class, you can like say whenever I pause, you say the next word.
Yes.
That's kind of like that, and that really keeps kids focused too.
On those
Kind
words.
of motivated.
There's 100 different ways of doing it.
Million ways, but
Right. And then just last for fluency, another way to increase that fluency and comprehension all in one. Don't be afraid to send home fluency work. Extra fluency practice. We know it might not come back, but guess what? It might come back. So I think it's worth trying it. We're going to be talking about decodable passages, but tying what they're reading to their phonics instruction. That's the new thing. Instead of just sending a book home, hey, go at it. Practicing whatever skill they're working on in the classroom so they can be successful. This is a great website I've been using this past year. It's toolsforreading.com, and on it is the West Virginia Phonics. If you've never used West Virginia Phonics, they have decodable passages already on the website. The only bad thing is they're only available till June 30th. So you have about 2 weeks. I did it the other day. I went and I downloaded every single skill. There's 10 skills. It starts with the most simple skill, your CVC words, and then it goes to more complicated. But that's all I use it for. I just get the decodable passages because I was having trouble finding decodable passages, and I was feeling like I was pulling from everything. This is all in one place. I made a folder on my computer. I just downloaded it as a PDF, and then I can go print those decodable passages for when I do read.
Jenny, will that come back in the fall?
I don't know. It says it on the website. I was going to show.
When you do that press reading, do you do it just a day or do you do the week?
I rotate every week, a different strategy. So like I might do it a week, then we move to poetry and we go back to that fluency. This is what we're focusing on.
But then you
So,
back around.
oh, sorry.
Then the third week read naturally. Then the fourth week we might be doing whatever. I mean, there's
So this
more
is
than
the
one way of
website.
doing it.
And then the West Virginia Phonics, and I don't know why, all of a sudden it just says June 30th. But they have the skills. And then if I clicked on short A, I mean, there's 26 pages for every skill. So if you wanted to use it, great. I just use it for the decodable passages. So like that would be an example. So all I did was I did the download. On my desktop, I just made a folder, West Virginia Phonics. I made a folder of each skill. and then they're just right there. So then I know, okay, if I have a group working on long vowels, I'm going to open this folder. I'm going to print those decodable passages.
Here's what else, and I haven't used this before, but I am going to use it. Two things that came off there when it showed you that lesson plan that caught my attention right away was dictation. 100 years ago when we were teaching spelling with Rebecca Sitton spelling, and Rebecca Sitton had dictation, 2 sentences. And we thought, whatever, why are we doing this? Dictation is really, really important right now in your reading, and it will be part of your letters as well, because it's having you practice those writing. At our school, we went back to handwriting because of processing and because you need to be able to do that. And that's the other thing that is helping them to learn to read. So that West Virginia, it's all research based. It's got dictation, it's got all that in there. It's the right direction.
And then I just wanted to show you on FastBridge, if you're under your teacher name, that's the teacher in our school, and training and resources as one of the tabs. If you scroll down, and under the reading interventions, you can go, where I found those passages were under the fluency. So I open the fluency. They have sight words, repeated readings, and that's what I use for just to get a passage for them to practice. And it's right there in their by grade level. Just so you know.
You might want to check your school filter if you want them. Ours says it's blocked due to mature content.
The West Virginia phonics?
Yeah, so I just emailed my tech department.
I wonder
wanted to check
why.
if you wanted more.
I haven't come across a naughty one yet.
I don't know. I emailed them. I'm sure it's just their filter just picks something.
Oh, that's wild. Well,
Yeah, well, look at the decodable. You got some wild level A's there, and
I
those
guess.
short A could get you in trouble.
Okay, so that was our fluency when we brainstormed what we were doing as fluency. Those are some things that we came up with as our top resources, but we wanted to have time because we know that you guys all have great ideas for your own classroom, so we wanted to put together like a kind of a list of stuff that has worked well in your classroom for fluency, or any thoughts you have about fluency. So, any thoughts?
Yeah, share on anything.
We use Flipgrid. So we take reading passages and we have the whole class do it. And every morning it's part of their morning work where they basically record themselves reading. And it times them, for that 1 minute, and then they graph their own.
I love that.
I like it because it took the pressure off of you. So now they're managing it themselves.
We usually have them graph their cold read and then their hot read to see the difference.
Yes.
But I never thought about graphing compared to the goal that
Yeah.
we're needing to hit for.
And you could,
FastBridge.
edit that goal too. If you have a reader that's reading 20 words, 125 is going to seem a little out there. So,
When you're setting them for failure, and if this is about motivating an unmotivated reader, I'm not going to read for you.
right.
If I have 100 words I have to do, forget that.
So, do you share those flip grids with parents?
We
Don't. I wonder
That's one
how
step we have.
powerful that would be for them to hear. How many of you guys have used Flipgrid? That's a great resource. And it's a free resource. Yeah. Kids love it. Any other fluency activities that anybody wants to share, or questions or comments?
We got a new reading series this past year. We went with CKLA Amplify. And I was kind of a guinea pig. I took it upon myself to incorporate reading groups because we used to have guided reading, and
Yeah.
I missed being able to
They don't
see
have that.
what our kids could do.
Yeah.
And so I used treasures is what was given to us for decodable text. And then I grouped them based on their ability, and they read them. And I read it, they read it. We picked out like their target, like if it was short A, short O, we highlighted, and then we always built words with magnets, wrote sentences, and then I did take the press lists and I progress monitored them on that scale after 5 days to see if they were ready to move on. If they got 80% or more, then moved on to the next skill. If not, then I backtracked and we did it again.
Are you in Esterville?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. And then our WIN group, we did the kids that were just below the cutoff, that were progress monitored but not seen by an interventionist.
Yes.
Then we did the repeated readings from FAST.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't graph it,
Yeah.
but they had a recording sheet where they wrote the number that they got, and then they tried to beat it the second
Yep.
time. So it's
Perfect.
basically the
Same-
same thing. It's
same
just laid
idea.
out differently. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
How many years have you done CKLA?
This coming year will be year 2. So I did it during the knowledge portion because it shows you where to break it up, like a good opportunity for a break. So then I did 2 groups, and then we would finish the application part, and then I would do the WIN group. I want to be able to do it with skills so I can see everybody every day, because I think I had 4 groups and I could see 3, but I haven't figured out where yet because there's so much in the skills that I haven't figured out where to
We had
do it.
another school that is using CKLA was struggling in kindergarten with the knowledge part of it. But when they got to the end of the year, they now get it. That is very essential part of your reading instruction.
It's very-
They did that part in the afternoon.
It's very heavy and it's very dry reading, but it's very, very good.
That's good.
And it's scientific based, and it follows letters
Yep.
to the T.
Before we move on to the next part, if you're working on fluency and you don't see progress, so that's kind of where Troy and I come in, is what are we going to do? What are we going to intervene with if we're not seeing that process? So we have that 3rd grade group that I talked about. We were seeing really low scores and we weren't seeing the progress that we knew there should be. So that's where that decoding skills came in. We reassessed their decoding skills to be sure that fluency is even the appropriate target. So before these past 2 years, I didn't even think about what could have been before fluency, and we're finding out that kids are having some real decoding issues. And a lot of it is because of that 2nd grade with mask, and then the 1st grade losing that very important second half of 1st grade.
I went ahead, I had a couple kids that moved in that I was not sure what to do. I don't think IEP is the answer to everything because it's not going to solve the problems. And I always feel the pressure that when our 5th graders move to the middle school, we've got 1 more year to get them to a point, because you can't expect the middle school to be able to take care of all the problems. So we were very fortunate in our district to have an AEA consultant that was unbelievable with reading. And so a lot of times I would take the student and the teacher that I was working with, and we would go and we'd come up with a scripted plan for that child that was very, very rigid, never missing core ever. But that really helped me a lot. And then we have PLC, so we have 7 sections of 4th grade, an interventionist, a special ed teacher, so there's 9 of us. And we would bring those kids up to that team and talk and kind of brainstorm, because what if you don't see progress? You got to deal with it. And we had quite a few success stories because this is all new.
Okay, we're supposed to take a break, so we thought maybe at this point we'd take a break. We do have a very interesting article about dyslexia. So while you take a bathroom break or whatever you need, we'll put those articles on your table, and then when you come back, feel free to skim it, read it, kind of get the main idea of it, and then we'll talk about it after our break. Interesting because obviously Troy, he works with the guidance counseling part of the younger kids, and then I've had a couple kids who were actually diagnosed with dyslexia this last year, and so to merge the 2 ideas that these kids have those social emotional problems going along with dyslexia. Obviously, we cannot diagnose that as teachers, but just know that the stuff that we are doing in our classrooms with the word work, which we're going to segue into, will help all students, especially those with dyslexia. So it's not like you have to do a different plan for students with dyslexia. It will carry over. So take this with you.
And one of the things I'm going to say about this is why I like this article that Jenny had a lot is because this is true. All of this social, emotional, and anxiety that's happening. But on the flip side, which is why we're talking about word work, a lot of these kids, because we're going to talk about nonsense words even in 4th and 5th grade, and why a lot of these kids that are dyslexic are highly intelligent. And it's very, very difficult because now even the AEA cannot diagnose dyslexia as much as they could. So when we're looking at these kids, okay, and this is an opinion, if you put someone on an IEP that is dyslexia, how is that really going to change? Like, their SDI is going to have to be completely research-based because there is no cognitive disability. It's somehow processing, and if they've gotten by this far with able to read, then they must be quite brilliant. And so the word work that she's going to introduce on that is really, really, really important for students with dyslexia.
So before we start word work, just know that I am constantly learning how to do word work. As I said, I've never taught anything lower than 3rd grade. I've had to go to my primary teachers to even begin to think about teaching anything dealing with words or sounds. So even when I'm working with a small group of students, I'll make mistakes all the time. Like, that's not a schwa sound. What was I doing? So this is probably the biggest area that I've had to self-teach and learn about because it's something that is totally out of my comfort level or realm. So after doing the screening and we see that students are not meeting benchmarks, we do a different sort of diagnostic. I haven't found one that's my go-to yet. I'm constantly like switching it up. Maybe for this student it works, but for another student, oh my gosh, that's way too complicated. But some that we have learned or used, bridging the gap, we'll talk about. Because we are doing the letters, there is a letters placement test for phonics and word diagnostic test. PACE, I think I did a couple students with, but that just gives you an idea of where to start. And then again, going back to that fast bridge, if you go to your A-read, if you administer the A-read and you do the screening to intervention, that's another part where it will tell you where to start. Maybe they need CVC, maybe they need short vowels. So at least you have an idea of where to start and to go from there. We use Haggerty in our building. I don't want to come attached. So with my little 3rd graders, I do have some groups that are using this. So this is the very beginning Haggerty book. So like skills that they should have had in kindergarten, we're doing in 3rd grade intervention groups. So it's amazing, and they actually do need it. When I do this with them, I'm like, oh my goodness. So when you research the science of reading, all of this stuff you're going to hear about. It's all manipulating those sounds. So if you're not familiar with it, it's like a 5-minute small group or whole group intervention. I do make sure that if I have my small group, I do it as a whole group, maybe 1 or 2 days. And then that 3rd day, it's the same skill throughout the whole 5 days. I am doing some individual listening because it's really easy, even in a group of 6 students, for someone to blend in and not even show me that, oh, you are not getting this. So just an example of what it sounds like, and you can kind of be my students here. Say ed. Add sh at the beginning. Shed. So in their brain, they're having to reverse putting that. Say at. Add at the beginning. That. And then kind of going backwards in the second section, say fish. Get rid of ish. And for those of you starting letters training, this is right on with it. So this is a daily intervention that we do with word work. And then Troy does the higher up.
So I put like the packet of resources, it's just different resources. And so I photocopied a couple covers, like Bridging the Gap. And when Jenny said that she doesn't have just one go-to, you can't, because they're all different. This is almost all oral. And so I like this because if I have an associate, it isn't like a thesis she's reading or he is reading to get things implemented. This has an easy assessment, simple. Your lessons, Is it beginning sound? Is it ending sound? Is it manipulation of letters where you're deleting or you're adding? Is it syllables? It's simple, and it's 5 minutes. And so this, when you determine what's giving them grief for fluency, this is one resource right here that you can use. That it is, even if you could just go online and look at what the lessons are like, and I can pass it around too, it's easy. And you don't have to be solely responsible for it. Your associate can. The other one that I included in your packet, and so a lot of you are familiar with it, are starting letters, and it correlates with Jenny's dyslexia article, is a letters assessment. I know that's something totally different, but it has a section, where you're doing beginning sounds, ending sounds, but they're made up words. They're nonsense words. And I thought, why in the world would I spend any time in fourth grade on nonsense words? Well, it goes back to her article on dyslexia, because they're highly intelligent. They've memorized all these words, but they are not transferring these sounds. And it just all of a sudden kind of made sense to me on that one. So I included a sample of what the letters assessment looks like. You can look at the Bridging the Gap. I put the author on it, and I think she's got Haggerty coming around.
Yep, so the primary is coming around as well. Yeah. Did that used to be blue? I have no idea. This is my second
The
year.
upper level was.
I have a blue one from when I talked to him.
You'll have to look at it and see if it correlates. Just thinking about, I know this is hard to see, but our old, I can't even think, like sight word walls. Word walls.
Yeah, it was well.
Those are kind of going out the window now. And if you're starting letters, or if you're getting into the science of reading a new curriculum, we go more now by the vowel sounds and how your mouth is opened. So this is called the vowel valley. So it just goes with how wide your mouth is. And when I'm doing this, I feel like a speech pathologist, and what the heck am I doing? But just know that there's kind of a new way of sorting words. And you can search vowel valleys, and it's a good thing to put on your wall instead of that word wall. It comes with our reading series.
Now we kind of talked about already with the nonsense.
You read it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the orthographic maps, when I had that third grade class that I talked about, my AEA consultant, I remember distinctly we were in this meeting, and she's like, well, you just need to do some orthographic maps. And I'm like, okay. I was like, should I know what this is? And so I have been doing it for the last couple of years, really trying to simplify it for myself, because that seemed way overwhelming. But it's how students learn to recognize each letter of the alphabet and how each letter represents a sound. So instead of just teaching them the memorization of ABCs, what do those sounds mean? So I just use a simple method whenever we're working with words. We just do a fist, and then they tap the sounds. Some people tap with their fingers. And then we use blocks, so we match the number of sounds we hear to the blocks, which when you're just starting out, it's weird because you want to do it by the number of letters in a word. And then the part that I need to get better at is graphing it, putting it to print. And Troy and I talk about that all the time. We do our Haggerty lesson, we do our FIS, our orthographic maps, but then when do we have students actually go and write those words or dictated sentences, which we'll talk about? That's the part that I know that I need to get better at. So this is kind of just an example of how I might use it in the classroom if you have the word shin. So fist, and then we're tapping the sounds. So sh, I, n. There's 3 sounds. So I'm going to get 3 blocks in front of me. And then I can tap it again. Sh, I, n. Put them together. And then I could go graph it by writing that word down.
Do you use the same color for vowels all the time?
Good question. So I have researched that. And if you're getting more complex words, Yeah, you can use the same color blocks. And when I'm first starting out, I don't even worry about the colors because that seems like it's two things going on at the same time. Like, what color am I supposed to use? Plus, how am I tapping this out? And so I don't really get to that part yet. But I had to look that up too. I was like, should I be using the same color every time? And I love these foam blocks, the kids. Easy enough for me to use. Anybody have any experience with doing something similar?
Really Great Reading does that strategy as well.
Yes, Really Great Reading.
They always use red for the bottle.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
And kids catch on that really fast.
And I just love how you can hear them say the sounds, and then if you see them put out, they say sh in, but then they write a O for the middle sound. That's very telling. So it's a really good way to monitor your class. Go ahead, Troy.
One thing that I used, we had a student that arrived that was a non-reader, and I went to the kindergarten teachers. Play-Doh for the sounds, and then I think I have a copy of it because this is all new. This is what my orthographic map looked like, and so they took the tiles and they pushed them forward. Whatever, I mean, there's a million different ways of doing it, but it's one way of recognizing the sounds of the letters, which is going to bring us to the next one, and this is where I need your help. So I was in a kindergarten classroom, and I was supposed to get a kid, but I was kind of watching what they were doing. I thought, what in the world is this? It's called heart words. And I put it in your packet, and if anybody else has more information on it, I'm ready for it. So I understand the tapping, that's no big deal. I can push the letters forward. But there's tricky words. Your old friends, the fry words. So I've always thought it was very, very important that you have to know how to spell these, or how to read these words. But then you start off with like a word like of. Let's tap it. What are we doing? So that's what heart words are. So heart words are words that have tricky parts to them. And you've heard them, whether they're heart words, tricky part words. I put that stuff in there. And it just kind of talks about how you have this little strip. You choose a set of irregular spelled words, which is almost all of them on the 900 words that you just want kids to recall right away. You print a copy of the words. You display the words and have the students write the word to be dissected. And that's what you're doing. And what's really interesting on this, and I won't go into great details because this is my knowledge on it right now, the word can go away from being a tricky one once they're familiar with it. Like right away in kindergarten, the. Well, that's tricky, but it becomes so ingrained that goes off of that list. And it's a way of, I would call it coding. And I'm going to go back into that kindergarten classroom and I'm going to watch them do even more. And I'm going to find a YouTube video on it too, because that makes sense, because I never understood when I'm doing my fluency, why don't you just know these? When then you say it out loud, well, you want them to know 900 words just like that with kids that might have a little reading disability. So this is one way that you're tracking and coding, and then they can take the skills from certain words and take it to the other tricky words. But that's heart words. So any information we share out, I want to hear about it.
ReallyGreatReading.com has
I'm gonna write that down.
A whole section devoted to heart words.
Mm-hmm.
They have videos on how to teach it. They have what it is, how to use it. They have activity pages for them, and then they have videos for some of the words already made out.
I'm writing
Not
it.
all of them are in there, but there's a good chunk. We use that a lot when we teach them.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
And you had mentioned that website as well, reallyGreatReading.com.
Yep. And then
I'm going to add that to our slide.
I'm putting it on my notes.
and then it goes, and then /heart -word -magic will take you right there.
Like that.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so we are at the part. Thank you for that website. What strategies have worked well in your classroom with working on words? We don't need specific programs, but are you doing stuff similar to what we're talking about this morning?
Put your West Virginia site on there too, so when I look, because I want to look at this later, so I don't forget it. because that could be a lifesaver for text.
I feel like you first grade teachers and kindergarten teachers, this is something that you've always done or are more familiar with than us.
Or can I ask you a question? Or did it shift and go away? Because I can remember when we had anthologies, well, you do, because you would have taught out of Silver Secrets. It had it in there, and then it was kind of a shift. We're like, but don't teach the phonics in fourth grade. Are you crazy? And it's like, they're just natural readers. Well, that's not true. I think it went away and altogether, and I'm speaking in where we taught at.
For my work, this is just because we did guided reading for so long, and then I've incorporated it. But we did sounds to spelling when we had guided reading for phonics.
Sounds to spelling.
Which we don't use anymore now that we have CPLA. But one of them was bumpy writing, so you use like a knitting screen under a piece of paper, and then they write the words with a crayon for the text tab.
Oh, I love that.
Or you take Play-Doh and then use their pencil, and then they can write it and then push it away. We do that a lot.
That's right out of letters because they talk about the textures and the.
Wiki sticks are really good too.
What are those?
They're kind of like pipe cleaners, but they're made out of wax. So then they can bend them to form the letters.
That makes sense.
So then you can manipulate it, and then also my kids really got into this year those paint daubers. They would daub their words that they were writing on a piece of paper.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
Let's ask them this because Miss T gave it to us. What are your thoughts on Miss T teaches special ed in our building, and she came to us with a box of chalk. And I don't know if that goes with what you're saying, but having kids use chalk again to write, and because of the texture, I'd never heard of that before.
It is in some research about the benefits of writing with chalk. I could not get over the mess. Selfishly.
Lisa, you and I had chalkboards.
Yeah. I did too, Troy.
ROT has that with some of our kiddos.
Uses
that
the
struggle.
chalk.
Yep. If we have them in our classroom, they give us a little thing of chalk just because it helps with their grip. Because it's a little bit thicker than a pencil.
That's interesting.
That is.
Use that and hold their hand there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that cleans your desk. Even better.
Handwriting without Pearson is not for preschool.
They
use chalk as part of their handwriting process.
Really?
A little board, this tiny little board.
Because we have that in our schools too. I didn't know that was part of it.
So who has handwriting in their curriculum?
We ordered it.
Can I ask you why?
Well, there is a blog. I have to wipe the site, but it talks all about writing and the connection between reading and spelling.
It's true.
And we can't read our students' writing.
Exactly.
It's atrocious.
Uh-huh.
It just like I said, my last year our district had a Canvas. So did I like it at the time? Yeah, I had everything ready to go, and then I could archive it and then get it ready for the fall again. But I did a lot of damage to them, where even there was a series, Lucy Calkins, and Lucy Calkins always wanted the people to write their rough drafts. And I thought, are you out of your mind? No, that part made sense. Because I always thought that if you're writing this out, I don't want to go back and rewrite it again, but it was the processing. And I think that's why there is no time. Our fifth graders have band. They are to the second. But I think that it made sense to me now and with this research.
What writing series do you guys have?
Is it handwriting without tears? What is it? 'Cause we don't teach. I don't know.
That's what I'm trying to...
It's like preschool, handwriting without tears.
Yeah, it's...
But that went up a few more grade
I
levels.
think that is what we use.
Yeah, it goes up through.
Uh-huh. Originally, yeah.
And that's going through cycles too, just like
Yes.
phonics has gone through cycles. Yeah. Important.
We had a couple years where cursive was...
It was.
Yep. You veteran teachers, you're my heroes because you have gone through the ringer, I tell you what.
But it makes your brain confused.
So our last section is comprehension. So as we're doing comprehension, be thinking of some strategies that you've tried in your classroom, so we'll have that part to share out too.
Paragraph shrinking. So if you Google it, there's probably a million different ways that you can shrink paragraphs. We won't actually do it because of time purposes. Let's say that you had an article in Science or Social Studies, and our Neil Armstrong, we'll just take him. So I tried to have something that was what we were studying, and you would just simply practice. Reader 1, Reader 2. Reader 1, you are going to read up until a certain point, like maybe for 2 minutes. Reader 2, you're going to focus on what they're doing. You're going to listen to how they're reading and help do some self-correcting. You may go ahead and have them you may have a high and a low, I don't know, however you group in your class. Then I'm going to say stop. Reader 2, summarize. And I don't want a whole thesis. I want one sentence of what you just listened to. Because a good solid summary is 1 to 2 sentences, not all the extra. Okay, Reader 2, you're up. You're going to go ahead and start reading where Reader 1 left off. Reader 1, when I say stop, you're going to summarize. And I liked it because summarizing is big time in 3rd grade, but 4th grade especially. And it really helps you to inference eventually. I can go around the room and listen to your summary because I've already read the article, and I can put a plus or minus in my grade book. And by Wednesday, I have everybody done. And so that was one more way for me to get an assessment. I got fluency out of you, and I got a comprehension strategy all in my Science and Social Studies classroom. There's 1,000 different ways that you can shrink paragraphs on that one, but that was one strategy that I liked real well. It was easy.
I like tying it into Science and Social Studies too.
Mm-hmm. Dibbles. We won't actually do it, but you have one in your packet. If you could find towards the end, I think it's Kellogg, the Kellogg brothers. And if not, I didn't know if he got them in time because he made copies this morning, but I've got copies of it too. There you go. Yep. Okay, if you look at that, why would we do something like this? Dibbles is free, and it has multiple grade levels. So all you're doing on this, you do it individually, and once again, you don't do it. You might do it for a week. You say go. They read the passage. Then when you get to the box, they circle the word that makes the most sense. Okay, why? Well, go back to your letters training. Sometimes you have to have literal comprehension. You have to have it at its basic. You have to know where your kids are at, like the who and the what. Can you figure that out? 2, you're reading to yourself, so there's fluency. 3, it's eye tracking. Once again, it's eye tracking. Everything isn't about, when you have to have a purpose. And like I said, would maybe be 3 minutes of your Science or Social Studies or your whole group reading class period. And you don't have to do it all the time, but the tracking and the literal comprehension are essential. Because if they can't comprehend on here, what are you going to do when you get into your 3rd, your 4th, and your 5th grade textbooks that they can't read? And you'll be surprised.
This is another resource that we use in interventions. Sarah Vallow book. Is anybody familiar with this? She has very short one-pager strategies. They're leveled. So for example, if this one says levels F through M, that's your guided reading level. It's type fiction. And then just a small short lesson on how feelings change throughout the story. So if you're looking for specific things that you notice in comprehension, she is a great resource. She also has one on writing, so a writing strategy book. So if you're noticing that, these writers are not using word choice in their writing, go to the table of contents, word choice, page 62, you have your lesson right there.
And the beauty of that, and I put a lesson in there I photocopied a lesson, you could look at it. So let's say you've got a lot of kids that need help with reading, and it's a simple comprehension, it's research-based, your associate can do it as well. And it isn't 25 directions, it's 3 steps. 3. And it's leveled too, it starts all the way from the beginning to your higher end. So it can't be where you're scripting all these lessons for the kids because you don't have time. it's got to be simple, and it's got to be something that's going to be quick, and it's research-based, and it's got to be something that's going to give you a bang for your buck. That is good. The writing I have at the school, but I haven't used that.
That's just as good. I would highly recommend both. We just kind of listed some comprehension strategies we've done. When Troy talks about the paragraph shrinking, some of my third graders, they are not ready to summarize something that somebody else has read. So this is as simple as you can get, but I just always have these 4 posters, my wonderful drawing, but I have the 4 posters up on my wall. Help me. And these are always just a visual for them. And if they can retell the story using these 4 posters, they're at least getting the main gist of the story. Who are the characters, the setting, problem.
I always get in trouble.
Problem, and then the solution. And this has been a really great guide when we go to retell a story. And I know it's nothing magical, but it has really focused them in. KWL, just the words someone wanted, but then so. Just having those words in mind as they retell a story. The 5W questions, retelling with time order words, first, next, then, finally. All things that you guys are familiar with. And then if anybody's in 3rd grade, one of our standards that we've really been focusing on in this year is asking and answering questions. And we realize that kids are not able to take a text and ask a basic question about it, or even answer, finding the answer explicitly in the text. That's a hard skill that we kind of take for granted. So we've really zeroed in on that standard. So looking at your standards and thinking about which ones do the third graders struggle with. And when you have your PLCs or your time with your cooperating teachers, what are we going to do about those standards that they're not meeting yet?
I want to go back to the one that her posters, character setting, problem, and solution. And I also want to go to number 7, ask and answer questions explicitly. One of the biggest things that we learned about, and this is what we know about dyslexia, when they were suspecting a student that I was working with that had dyslexia, they said, don't underestimate anything. Don't infer that they have literal comprehension. So you need to constantly be asking the who and the what, even at the simple sentence, because that will tell you a whole story right there. Whether it might be someone that has some dyslexia that's very, very intelligent but has some problems with that, or someone that's very severe. I think we've all had a student that's been very severely reading disabled, and you're just sitting there thinking, the next teacher will cure them. Those are things that you can be doing that are very, very simple to get a grip on where they're at. Say something. I don't always buy that my kids, believe it or not, are reading. So when I taught whole group and I had science and social studies, once again, say something. There's stuff in your packet that you can look at, but I always would have them, when they partner read, okay, you're going to have to say something. And it wasn't like, oh, I thought this was cool. A very specific thing that we're looking for. I want you to say one thing about one of the heroes of the American Revolution. I want you to think one thing about kinetic energy. And they would say it verbally and they would write it in their notebook. One sentence. That way I got some bang for my buck. I also would maybe, if there was 6 pages to read, you would have to say something every 2, and I want it in your notebook. 1, I got dictation. 2, I got eye tracking because I wanted it directly from the text. 3, are you just sitting back there dinking around? And that worked, and it was simple. And there's also inside your packet a whole bunch of different prompts, but I always wanted them customized. I don't want to hear jargon. I don't want to hear something that doesn't even make sense. I thought this was cool. I thought this was this. I want specifics so that we have a purpose for reading and that you're comprehending. Because you can't always hold their hand, you know that. You need to be producing.
Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Just some different strategies in your packet about comprehension that you can
And they're simple, they're 4 steps.
take with you. Okay, so what is something that works in your classroom for comprehension strategies? I know there's like Troy said, millions of strategies, but is there something that sticks out to you for your own classroom that works well?
Well, I had a severely dyslexic student last year, and his comprehension was phenomenal. It was amazing.
Because they're intelligent.
He loved epic, and he loved like historical fiction books, and he would listen to auditory, and that was great. The auditory for him was, he needed that.
Any auditory books, yeah.
Even like text to speech.
Yes.
But with that, and why what you just said is so important, is because you just narrowed it down that there wasn't any sort of literal comprehension with this person. It was all processing of the letters, and there you could come up with a scripted plan for how to help him, and that's really important. And he felt successful. Because once again, what did Jenny's article say? All the things that you feel from a social emotional standpoint, who would want to come to school if you don't ever see success?
Right. Any others? Okay. So I know that this whole science of reading and this new way of teaching reading, for me especially, it's been very overwhelming, and people have recommended books, and I'm like, okay, I'll get to that, and I never get to reading a book. So something that's been really helpful for me, and I just keep sending Troy the episodes, but Literacy Talks is a podcast, and it comes out, and you can listen to the previous episodes, and they break it down really well. Like, what are the new strategies that we're using? There's 3 experts on this podcast. One works with teachers in college still. One is a primary teacher, and then one is an intermediate teacher. So it has different viewpoints of how they're going about with the science of reading. And then one of the ladies has a dyslexic child. So that has been really eye-opening. But they're like 30-minute episodes. I put them on when I go for a walk. And I feel like I just got more out of that than by trying to get through a book. So that's a good one. And then the Iowa Reading Research Center, they have done some work in Spencer. Mm-hmm. And their one episode, they only have 2 right now. This is a new podcast. But the one episode actually has Spencer teachers in it, talking about what we've done in our school district. But the Iowa Reading Research Center is a great resource. It's a great website. And then this podcast that I have come across in the last couple weeks, it's another one that I would recommend. Does anybody have any books that they would recommend? We've shared some today, podcasts or anything that you would like to share with the group that might be beneficial. The greatest teachers are each other, so anything, and it doesn't have to do a science of reading or websites. I added the tools for reading. Okay. So we're just going to go back to our objectives. By the end of the class, our hope was that you'll have practical, easy, customizable interventions to use with fluency, with word recognition, and then with that comprehension. I was stressing to my husband last night. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if these teachers are going to even get anything out of this. And they're like, well, maybe if they can walk away with one thing. And I was like, okay. So if you're able to walk away with anything, we call that a success. Mm-hmm. Any questions or comments? Or thank you for being a great audience.
And I would say hang in there with this research, because like what she said, it can be overwhelming. And like it's funny now, but it wasn't a year ago. Okay, well here's this. And I finally just looked at her and I said, what the heck? I didn't say heck, but that's what I'm saying here today. Which one do we use? And we're getting there. We're starting to get a district plan to come up with ways to teach kids to read
Yeah.
without overwhelming everybody.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Well, welcome back this afternoon, and it's my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speaker. Lisa Elliott taught for me for several years in Spencer. She was a lead teacher. She was active in the Iowa Reading Association. She has presented for me several places around the state. So I was really excited to get Lisa to come back and present for me again this year. So let's give Lisa Elliott a big round of applause.
Thanks, Bob. It's always great to see you again, too. All right. So you said if I taught for him a few years. Yes, the 10 years that Bob was principal at Spencer was great to work under him. And I've taught second grade for 30 years at Spencer Schools. Prior to that, I substituted a year, and I also worked in Dayton, Ohio. I did kindergarten there as well. And I got there because of this guy here in the other bike hat. The blue one's me, and that's my husband, Bill. And this is our fur baby now, since we're empty nesters, of course. That's Dakota, and we've been kind of getting into biking a lot. And so just a real brief about my summer. 2 weeks ago, I spent it in the Black Hills, biking the Black Hills. And it was with a RASDEC group, and we started in Spearfish and ended up in Spearfish. So we did a big loop. The biggest day was the Needles Highway. And of that day and the next day after it, not only going up hills, but I have a cheater bike. My husband refurbished my bike over to an e-bike because I have a torn meniscus and I can't really pedal as much as I used to, but as far as the force. So that helped me get up the hills, but you have to go down too after you get up. That was the part that was way out of my comfort zone. But yeah, going over 20 miles an hour on your bike going downhill is kind of a thing in those hills. But we had a good week that week anyway. We did not bring the dog on that one. He has a cart that we do haul him around in though. This is my daughter Lindsay and her husband Ronnie, and they live out on the West Coast in Portland. What brought her there is just her adventureness, I guess. I think we always tease that our girls don't love us because they move so far away, but that's not really true. I know because I talk to them almost daily, so I think I'm still okay with them. But when I was here last year, we were going to have a grandson, so that happened. And, well, I think at that time, yeah, we didn't know it was going to be a boy. That's right, because he was born in August. So anyway, this is Landon. And, of course, he's got to have his own page. And I'm going to be going out there after this reading conference, like on Friday, so I can't wait. I got to take care of him for 6 weeks with being retired this winter, so that was awesome. So it's going to be great to really see how much he's changed, and lots of FaceTime. And this is my daughter Emily. She works at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She's in the research lab there. Kind of some awesome work working with mice, and they're working on how right now when your organs shut down, sometimes after big diseases, they, before you pass away, like COVID, of course, is one, and sepsis and things like that. I think they got their money through the COVID grant. That's what they're working on, and different medications that maybe they can have that not happen to people, which is really exciting. And I know a few weeks ago she said, "Mom, I think we're on to something." So it's like, yeah. So we've got one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. Great places to visit. Anyway, to get started this afternoon, I know that Jenny and Troy did an awesome job kind of getting you started into some comprehension thoughts. My take on this is just a little bit more different, maybe. Some definitely things you can take back to your room, but also just to think about what really is a comprehension strategy versus a comprehension skill, and how we need to focus on those strategies and what a strategy really is. So just to start out with, I went back and looked at my old notes from previous PDs, In Spencer, we were pretty fortunate to have some pretty outstanding speakers. Kathy Gansky at one point, Tim Rosinski at one point. I'm sure there's others I could think of, but it was just so awesome to have, real experts there. So I looked through some of their notes. Wendy Robinson was another one of our speakers, and just their thoughts about comprehension. And I thought this was kind of thought-provoking to me. You say you understand what you read, but you're also reacting to that text as well. So it's a I would say a combination type thing. You got a lot going on in your brain when you comprehend. And some of the books that I used, also with Linda Hoyt, I really like this one, Revisit, Reflect, and Retell. And I should have thought about what the copyright of this is. It might be a little older, but of course I'm one of those older teachers. It's a 2009, but I think it's very applicable. And then the other one is Reading with Meaning by Debbie Miller. And this one's very practical. She has lots of hands-on type activities and things that you can just go right to your room and implement, as well as this one has many things that you can copy off, forms and graphic organizers and stuff like that to get your kids to be thinking about comprehension. So I just want to start out, I guess, first with reading a little bit here to get you thinking about comprehension. And so since you're my students, I'm just going to read you a passage. And so here's how Debbie Miller kind of starts out her book. New crayons and bright red baskets sit at the children's tables, flanking caddies filled with sharpened pencils, markers, scissors, and glue. So now I'm thinking, oh, okay, new things, everything's in the baskets. She's not talking about any kids yet. She's just talking about all the supplies. Oh, it must be before school starts. All right. There's a basket of songbooks that sit atop the small clusters of tables. Each holds 1 or 2 copies of the 5 Little Ducks. Oh, hunting we will go. Little Rabbit Foo-Foo. Dr. Seuss ABCs. Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. The Lady with the Alligator Purse. Chicken Soup with Rice. Also fairy tales, picture books, and volumes of poetry and nonfiction texts round out the selection. So now I'm thinking about, oh, I know some of those titles. Yeah, I've used some of those in my room too. At the meeting area is an old floor lamp, and several small table lamps glow softly. It makes me think about my reading corner, how I had some lamps in there, and how it was a soft, nice place to be. The shades are decorated by children from years past. Plants that have survived the summer are back home on the window ledge. Oh, isn't that cool? She's got live plants there. So I can see that picture in my mind. And shades decorated by children from years past. Ooh, that's a kind of neat idea, isn't it? Maybe there's book characters on there. I wonder how the kids decorated those, or just drew books. Low shelves are filled with books, sorted into labeled tubs. Arnold LaBelle, Henry and Mudge, Space and Water books nestled with reptiles, and tubs titled Predictable Books, Song Books, Fairy Tales, Insects, Poetry, Biographies. Oh yeah, so she's got fiction and nonfiction. Okay. Anyway, she goes on to describe more of her room. And she says, finally, 24 hours later, I find myself under those same clusters of tables, picking up stray Unifix cubes, assorted crayons and marker lids, 2 butterfly barrettes, an animal cracker, and 1 small white lace sock. On the tables, the crayons and the caddies are messy. Pencils are mysteriously dented and have mixed themselves with the markers, and the glue looks like it has had more than just a gentle squeeze. So I know a lot of us can put ourselves right in those shoes, and we can see that in our mind, kind of the messiness of the end of the day. Her desk is piled high. There's registration forms, emergency cards, testing dates, money and checks for lunch, notes of those parents who'd like to join the PTA. 2 parents have written notes to let me know how gifted their children are. I plop in my chair and I take another look. And for me, it just puts me kind of right back into all of those things that you have to attend to at the end of the day, and thinking about all of that before you can actually pack up your bag and think about your family and go home. Yesterday's empty flower pots and painted bouquets of what I think may be daisies, roses, and geraniums. Children's portraits with their too high on the forehead eyes. Crinkled paper hair, glued on earrings, and bright red lips smile back at me. And then I read over their interviews. Hannah wants to learn to write in her little letters. Cole wonders why the octopus squirts ink. And I got to thinking, oh yeah, I did that a lot every year in my room. I gave him an interview with paper. Tell me about you. What are your favorite things to do? What do you enjoy? What books do you like to read? Eric wants to be a fireman. Will would go to the moon. And Jake would live in the theater district in New York City. And when I asked Grace, what's one more thing I should know about you? She answered, you should know I believe in fairies. And Breck's answer? I really want you to teach me. And now I know for sure, it really doesn't get any better than this. So I hope you feel like your students really want them to teach you. I know sometimes we kind of struggle with some of that, but I hope today I can teach you some things about comprehension. And so to start out with, if we think about just reading that passage, there were lots of different strategies that my brain was doing and kind of talking aloud as I was reading that to you to help you understand how I was comprehending. Okay. All right, so one thing I think we need to remember is that listening comprehension is about 2 years above a child's reading comprehension. So, which is another reason why it's very, very important to choose, I think, well thought out literature to read to your students so they can get that vocabulary and be able to comprehend a lot higher than they can read. And I also felt in my room, I loved to start out many lessons with a book, because I think that puts us all on the same kind of playing field and level, and gives them background knowledge, and then you can springboard from that book. Lots and lots of science topics, social studies topics, I think are terrific to start out with books, and I don't care how old the kids are. I think that's would be a great place to begin, because you have such a variety of students in your room, some who've traveled, some have never been out of the town they live in. You know, some watch a lot of television, some don't watch any. And you just kind of have to get a knowledge base, and then you can kind of pull from them what they know too, while you're talking about a book. So you want to talk about comprehension, you want to build that before, during, and after you read. Don't just wait till the very end to give a quiz. Not like, okay, tell me about this. You know, just don't ask questions at the end. That's it's not how we want to teach comprehension anyway, for sure. We want to talk about what's going on as you're reading. Why those think alouds, talk alouds are really, really important. So now, most of the rest of the things I have for you this afternoon are going to access, kind of looking back and forth at these 2 posters. And so when we talk about comprehension, if you look up the research and things about it, they talk about skills versus strategies. And so here's some differences about our reading skills. So I'm going to give these to you guys that are here. You're welcome. Oh, gotta get unhooked here. I'm not gonna pull that around with me. Okay. Get hooked back up here. And I know you guys are all great readers and great comprehenders, so we won't go one by one through them or anything like that on here. And those folks of you at home, you can download this, you know, easily and make a copy of it too. But if you look at skills, are answers are really have an answer to them. A lot of them, they're very automatic, they're very repetitive. Ways that teachers teach them is that they're practiced over and over till they get to the point where you can just do that skill without really thinking about it. It's just a part of your reading awareness. But as you're teaching children, young children, you need to actually teach them before they become an automatic process. And then reading strategies, you are actively thinking about them more. It's more about the cognition that's going inside of your head, the whole main, like I say, those are kind of like the bigger picture. Like some people are thinkers that they like to take the whole picture and dissect it to small pieces, or you're the backwards other way. You like the small pieces and you finally get to the whole. So I see skills as kind of like our small pieces, and the strategy is like getting to the whole. And you know, you got the whole, your reading strategy, and then you got the little piece, the skills to get to that. So here's what we mean by that a little bit more. So you can see skills are really these, I guess I should have counted them. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different elements that they pull out here. So our reading skills, our main idea, author's purpose, cause and effect, compare and contrast. And I'm sure as I'm rattling these off, you can kind of think about, oh yes, I've probably taught a lot of these in my room. Genre, plot, point of view, sequencing, theme, and story elements, and probably can think of lots of different activities that you did to show and teach those. And I know I did those many of those in my second grade room. But understanding more about comprehension, the more reading that I've done with it, kind of came to the realization that you've got to really focus a lot on your strategies. So like explicitly teaching as well as continually modeling and practicing reading comprehension strategies with students is one of the most important jobs we have as teachers of growing readers. Research shows us that teaching reading strategies encourages students to read and interact with the text in a purposeful, meaningful way. The ultimate goal is for students to use these strategies independently, okay, so that we can get them to successfully comprehend different texts on their own. Okay, so think about these as more of the big pieces that you are eventually getting to, our strategies. Okay, so let's see, I've got to go back to my PowerPoint here. Okay, so there's the skills again. And so our skills, like main idea and cause and effect and all of those things, are associated usually with abilities required to answer questions. They're more automatic. We assess them usually after you read. They're repetitive because you can find the main idea of the piece. Tell me a cause and effect from this passage. How could we compare and contrast? What's the plot? What's the genre of this? Accents with reading skills are automatic in their routine, and they use them without knowing them until we point them out to them. That's called cause and effect. That's called compare and contrast. They're practiced within the same manner across multiple situations. So you can take any piece, and use the same ways to teach it, so they know that that's a skill. And then we have our strategies, which is on the bottom of your sheet. And a strategy, you actively think about the text that they're going to understand. So now we're thinking about this, a certain passage, a certain piece of text. And strategies aren't really always about answers, but they're about the actions that readers take to remember the text, to actually do that comprehension, to comprehend it. What is their brain doing, working on, thinking cognitively as they're working on a text? They use it intentionally. We can't really learn it by repetition because every piece is different. And so you have to bring with you your comprehension strategies to that certain specific passage or that piece of text in order to understand it better. And if they're doing it, you can really tell if you ask a child, some questions, or ask them to summarize, or ask them to visualize for you what they've read, you can tell right away that they're not pretending to figure out the answer. They really did have to comprehend it to be able to answer what those strategies are asking for. Okay, and they involve a lot of effort and deliberate active involvement. So it's a lot of brain power and thinking going on when you're using your comprehension strategies. So there's a difference between approach of teaching skills versus strategies. With strategies, it's a lot about what the students are bringing to the thinking of their text. And with the skills, it's really about just getting a quick answer. And do you have to run off and change all your lesson plans now? Well, no, because you still need to have those skills to build up to the strategies. But maybe we can take a more conscious effort of stepping back a minute and thinking, am I only teaching my students skills, or am I really teaching them how to comprehend and the comprehension strategies that you do use with any piece? Anyway, it's just something to think about. So anybody have any thoughts about that? Or has that been an old hat for all of you? I'm not sure. I know it kind of took me back a few years ago and it's got me thinking more about, am I just rattling through a list of skills for my kids and thinking that they're comprehending? I don't know. Yeah, I see some head shakes out there.
Sometimes this is my first year in second grade, so a lot of skills, and we do CKLA, and then when it came to the writing, none of that was applying in their writing. It was all back to inventive spelling. So it's disappointing, but I mean, not all the time, but for the most part.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Then applying it to the big picture. Again, it's kind of like what this is too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another thing we think about with comprehension is, do we always use decodable text? Because with, of course, science of reading, that's a really big thing now, especially in our younger grades. But I'm sure even 4th and 5th, right? I mean, yeah. Or do we not? And the different things I read about that is that you need both. Especially if you're going to be asking phonics questions and things like that, yes, you need decodable text. But I personally feel, if this is opinion, that if you really want to work on comprehension and things like that, that with rich literature, a lot of it's not going to be decodable. So it's kind of more of maybe a whole class type reading, or I love to use readers' theaters to build fluency. I love to do that in my classroom. Readers' theaters are awesome for your whole class to do. I would split them up into small groups, or we do the same readers' theater throughout the whole room. And even those low readers, by the time we'd practice that readers' theater, 5-6 times, they knew all the words on that paper too, just as well as the child who could read it the first time through. So that's another place I think that you could use text that's not decodable. And I've also read some things where younger teachers are like getting rid of all of their leveled readers and they only want decodables in their room. And it makes me kind of cry because I think, no, that's not what real reading is. I mean, that's back to Dick, Jane, and Sally, which is what I learned how to read. But Dick, Jane, and Sally at least kind of related a little bit to what was going on maybe in my life, but I don't think that lots of decodable texts maybe do that, which I've seen anyway in the schools. It's, a contrived story with predictable, this set of words, this vowel sounds we're working on or whatever it may be, which I get. But in order for a child to love reading, they need stories, literature, children's lit, meaning make things that make them cry, things that make them laugh, things that make them wonder. So I really kind of have a little bit of a shakiness about, oh gosh, please, no, don't just only have decodable text in your room. You need all kinds of literature. That's kind of my soapbox there. This website down here is a gal I like to follow her blogs, and she has things on Teachers Pay Teachers, Mrs. Richardson's class, and that was just kind of a fun thing for you to look at, and she was talking about decodable or not too, on that spot that I put. So like I said, so decodable or not decodable, and then we hear a lot about passages. Well, I think passages are good. They've got their place. If you're wanting to work on, your CBMs and things like that for practicing and assessing skills, and they're good for a short way to assess a skill. Do they understand cause and effect? Can they pick that out of that passage and so forth? You don't have to have a whole book. But I guess another part of my soapbox is, use as real text as much as you really possibly can from real books, from real literature. It's nice to pick up those easy books that have all these passages made out for you and printed for you, but it's not really going to be thought about later on. I mean, like the child will read the passage, but I assure you probably in a couple of days they can't remember a thing about what they read on that passage. But if they read a literature book that touched their heart or mind or something in a better way, they're going to remember that a lot more, and it will bridge that gap to, reading is a cool thing to do rather than just, this is reading class. No, reading is like an all-encompassing of your life. I think it should be in order to get students wanting to do it. Graphic organizers are, actually, I didn't write this. I found it in my reading, Raise the Reading Bar. I thought this describes me. I use graphic organizers a ton in my room. I thought they were really good supports. You could use them with small groups or the whole class. And lots of times you can just take a piece of paper and have them fold it into squares, and you've got, okay, now we're going to do, text features. Just write down 4 quick text features, have them jot where it is, what page in their book, really quick check. You could use those 4 squares for character setting, problem solution. I know I used a paper a lot, sometimes just 4 squares, and didn't worry so much about having something really cool printed off on the copy machine all the time. You can just grab a piece of paper and quickly get a lot of information out of them. So maybe thinking about 4 boxes might help you a little bit too. But it just helps them to organize their thoughts and to write them down in unique ways. And I think that also, if you do print off some of them, different graphic organizers, is great. I didn't bring it with me today, but I have a binder that's just full of all different ones that you can use with any book. And I think that's kind of the way to go in using those. And then I also use anchor charts a lot, and so that's what most of these slides have for you guys to look at here for the rest of this presentation here. Just some different ideas of anchor charts, and kind of, when I look at an anchor chart anyway, it helps me to get into my head the thoughts of what are the parts to this strategy and what is it that I need to teach the kids. And you can write those anchor charts like together as a class, or you can have them done up ahead of time too. And sometimes I would just take a piece of paper and cover some of it up as we talked about it, instead of showing them the whole thing at once. if I made it ahead of time. This was a good book also, 7 Strategies of Highly Effective Readers. Talks about, they use these 7 strategies, which are just a tad different a little bit than the ones that I gave you, but if you think about it, really the only difference that they're doing is they're calling the making connections activating instead. And this is what I see a lot with their science of reading. They'll talk about these 7 strategies versus the ones I have listed on this page. And I kind of came about that later on in my development of this presentation. So science of reading is, kind of new to me. And so these are the ones that science of reading seems to draw attention to. I was trying to think if there's any other one that's different. Oh, searching and selecting, which I think is kind of a part of evaluating. You're searching and selecting for different information. You're evaluating your information that you're reading. You're evaluating the text. So those are the same. Let's see. All right. So our first one, I'm not going to give you a big rundown on all the skills, but we're going to just go with the strategies. So making predictions is the first one on our list. And I found, this is back to this Mrs. Richardson again. She had a good thing about making predictions and some free things that you can download here. So I'll just kind of go through that a little bit here. Of course, it wants me to, do I want to accept their cookies? All right, get rid of that. So like she says, when you're sitting around and reading a book, how do you know that your kids are engaged? And it starts talking about take the information, make predictions, guess what will come next. If they're excited to see what they're thinking is what actually happens. I think this is going to happen next in the story, or I think the character did that because of why. All those things about making predictions. It goes deeper than just what happens next, though. That might come naturally to some students, but we also need to explicitly model and teach how to make reasonable predictions. And so some of her favorite ways to do that here. She has a free packet that you can download, this free resource here. And then let's go down here. So some ideas she has for doing that is during your active read aloud, read the book, encourage them to pre-read the book, like a story walk and things like that, to make some predictions. All right. So there's here we go. I knew that was there somewhere. Picture walk, introduce the vocabulary to help them comprehend the text. What do you think this book will be about? Where will it take place? Who or will be the main characters? What do you think will happen? And you get a lot of that from just looking at the cover, too. It's a good way to start making predictions. I don't know if Bob said or not, but you guys all have access to the video that we're doing here too for the folks at home. So if you don't get everything written down or whatever, you can always go back and look, and then you guys can have this to click on to the different websites and stuff that I have for references. All right, so then she uses that Jennifer Scarborough's reading rope, which is another neat thing to read more about. And then she does like sentence stems to get them to thinking. I predict that, I think that, I can predict that because, what will happen next? Because, I predict the problem will be solved this way, because, not just let them off on just, I think the character will fall down. Well, because why? Why do you think that? They need to have evidence for their predictions, I guess is the best way, I'd say, to teach making predictions so they can be more meaningful. And I love also using literature notebooks. I love those things where you can get on Teachers Pay Teachers and you can find a bazillion million of them. They're really fun and cute, but just don't get too far out, I think, cutesy and fun sometimes, because like I said, sometimes you just take a piece of paper, do the same thing as send their copy machine and doing all this and cutting it all out, and then having your kids glue it in, and there goes 10 more minutes when you could have used that time a little bit more wisely for doing something different. And I think sometimes elementary, we kind of have that tendency to want to go to the maybe too much cutesy fun sometimes, that we need to get just back to the basics and just like cut dry, get it done as well. And so anyway, this is her interactive read aloud that she does a big lesson with, and you can look at that and you can download that and you can get her some of her materials. All right. Here's some anchor charts that I found, and I think it really kind of sums it up good. And I think anchor charts are just so awesome for kids to have around your room. I mean, anybody can walk in right away and see what you're teaching, and it's such a good reminder for them. You can, Google anchor charts and look, but I hope I took out some of the time for you, and I picked out the ones that I thought were best of what I looked at. So you can say, make them real simple, just a face, or like this one's kind of like for older kids. Based off your clues and text or pictures, you have to have a reason, or how did you come up with that prediction. And also remembering that you are making predictions before you read, during your reading, and after your reading. And then also think about it at the end. Don't just say, what was your prediction, and call it the end. You need to go back and confirm it. Yes, yoo-hoo! I did think the right thing. That is what happened. Or no, that's not what occurred. And I wonder charts are good too, and also a good thing to think about with predictions with your littles is to use the 5 senses, or some of the senses. That also gets them kind of thinking and activating that mind to come up with some predictions about what they're wondering about, what they're thinking about, what do they think they'll see, what do they think they'll smell, what will they touch in that story. All right, next one's asking questions. So in asking questions, let's see here. I'm going to write that down. Question refers to any gaps the student has between what they've read and what the author intends for them to understand. So it's, did I understand what it is that I've read? Did that make sense to me? It's time for them to formulate questions based on the knowledge that they have so far and what they're not sure about yet. Question can be directed toward the author, but generally the questions will be, of course, toward the teacher or the parent. And in a way, you're doing it toward the author, but they're not right there to answer for them. Or you can also have, each other, the peers can think of questions and so forth that they have after reading a passage, or before they read the passage, or during they're reading the passage. During discussion time, it really is kind of amazing sometimes to hear some of the different questions and thoughts that kids have that you never thought of. So just give them some talk time, turn in talk time is really good for questioning. So they activate and interact with the text, and I thought these were some good anchor chart type situations that you could use, and like this is a handout that you could have for students to use. And here's a couple more. You could do some before, during, and after. What's the question? And then go back and write down what the answers were. Or this is kind of more of a fun one. What is the story about? Who is telling the story? What's the setting? The characters, back to that story retell. Okay. Summarizing is the third one. And I kind of feel like if you've had an order for these, I would put this more towards the end, because of course you're going to definitely summarize when you're finished with a story, and it's maybe more of a highest order thinking skill in a way, but I think this really, really helped me. I remember when I found out about using somebody wanted but so then, it kind of like was a big revelation in my room. It made a big change about writing a story summary. One of our title reading teachers had it in one of their reading notebooks. I happened to be looking through one of my students' notebooks from her class, and I went, oh, what is this? Because the sentences were just awesome from this child who had a difficult time getting into books, and actually, wowza, there was a whole summary written, but they used that setup. Somebody, who was the somebody they wanted, but that happened, so then, and then, what happened? So you're really saying your problem and solution as well, but in kind of kid ease, kind of natural talk. So like here's one. So then what was neat, if you have the kids do that part, we would do that for quite a while. I remember when I would teach it and use the fingers as well. But then when you have that done, then you can turn those answers into a full page, almost like book report. Your whole summary. Farmer Brown and the farm animals wanted to get some sleep. So the somebody was Farmer Brown, and they wanted to get some sleep, but Baby Duck kept interrupting them. So, but, there you can find, there's the but. And then so, the Baby Duck took him for a ride, and then that happened, and then, and then finally you got a good night's sleep. So anyway, that was very, very effective in my room. Here's some more summarizing anchor charts to kind of give you some thoughts about how to teach it. Keep it short, main ideas. This is also really a biggie. Kids, lots of times, they just want to open up the book and start copying it. It's like, tell me about the story. They just want to write the sentences down. No. Your words. That's a really big switch. And I always said, it's just keep it like you're talking to somebody, like you're telling your mom about the story, or telling your brother about the story. What would you say to them? And don't put your opinion in it if you're just doing a summary, unless it's, of course you're being asked, I guess. Okay. Visualizing, I think, is one of like the funnest, because I think for kids to really, really comprehend, they are making that movie in their heads all the time. And I would always tell my kids that you're making a movie in your brain as you read. What are you seeing? But don't also forget, what are you smelling? What would you be touching? What would you be, feeling, hearing as well? They create pictures in their brains. They visualize, they see that. And that's kind of an eye-opener sometimes for some of your struggling students, like, huh? What are you talking about? But then what you can do is, once again, give them that piece of paper and just have them draw as you read out loud, or do the boxes again. And what are you seeing in the first part of the story? What are you seeing in the middle? What are you seeing at the end? What would be a culminating picture that you could draw about what you're visualizing? What are you seeing as you're creating those pictures in your mind as you're reading? So this is kind of some ways that you could practice. I thought this was kind of a neat one, just about thinking of they're even kind of back to my 4 squares again, but the 4 seasons, and just jotting down some things that you would see during those different seasons. So they're not actually reading a book, but just activating that visualizing process, that's what you're going to apply then over to a book. Okay. Make mental pictures, and you revise your picture as you read. I thought this was kind of neat. It looks like they put up the different pictures that the kids had done. And I'm not sure if some of these, were first pictures, because they're maybe a little simpler, but it could just be for different students. This one's got the animals in the barn, so maybe they had to revise it. All right, making connections. This one is back to your text to self or text to text, text to the world, and teaching kids about how they can connect themselves to their own experiences, activating and tapping into prior knowledge about what they're reading. Their experiences are directly related to the reading material, discussions that you may have had previously. So that's kind of going back to, reading a text to them about a science topic or something like that. Relate other books that you have been read to, so your text to text, or other books that you've previously done in class. The more that you can make connections to what you're reading, the more you'll be able to learn as you read. And you think about events in your life that will make it much easier to relate the information to the students too. So you can bring in some events that you have and have kids talk about how they're thinking about that text to themselves or the text to the world, what they thought of out in the world that can make a connection to what they're reading. I was just thinking about something and it went. Sorry. Anyway, making those connections, building your schema, to it. Just drawing them into the text more, into the story more, into reading more. I think is very, very important. And this piece right here, I use that lots and lots and lots with the guided reading lessons and things like that. And I hope those things don't leave with the science of reading. I thought this was kind of neat. You start with, a topic in the middle and then kind of make your text to self, text to world, text to text, wherever out as it comes out, it should say text to world at the end. I thought that was kind of a neat way to look at it, how you relate to it, what you remember, and things like that. These were kind of some cute things, like you could, a globe, text to world, and a book is text to text, and it's kind of a person for text to self. To make those connections. All right. Monitoring or clarifying your comprehension, like having self-talk, I think is really what monitoring is, and teaching kids how to self-talk as you're reading. It's kind of like that light bulb moment, I'd say, for kids. Like when you're reading it, aha, oh, I never knew that. That's really a great monitoring thing that you can see that kids will do. Or they thought of something, but when they read, they thought something was a fact, but then they read something else and found out, oh, that wasn't true. And which are great ways to do monitoring too. Give them a time maybe where you just put up a chart paper. I would do this in my room and okay, we're going to start a unit on, I can't even think of a unit right now. It's like solids, liquids, gases, for instance. Okay, what do you know about solids, liquids, and gases? And write down their ideas, and then it'd be cool when we go and read text and then find out that, oh, some of those ideas that we thought before weren't true, or that story clarified my understanding about those kinds of that topic. And then also getting to, even more nitty gritty, did I understand that sentence? I think that's a huge one. I know early on in my career, I tutored my cousin's boy, and he was a 5th grader at that time, and I taught 2nd grade. And anyways, finding out that his big thing was, a lot of it was the visualizing, making that movie in his mind. He had a hard time doing that. But he also had a hard time when he would read something. He probably didn't take as much time as he should have to use his phonics skills, and he would say a word. And to get him to go back to his phonics skills, I just kept saying, did that make sense? Did that make sense? And he'd go, no, that didn't. Because he would just plug in some word that maybe began with the same sound and ended with the same sound, but that didn't, oh no, that doesn't make sense. So that's, I think, a great question for monitoring your comprehension. Does it make sense? And they have like, does it look right? Does it sound right? But I would definitely say, does it make sense? And then using those fix-up things, what can you do if it doesn't make sense? Well, I need to go back and reread it. I need to skip over it, come back. Does it make sense? Use my picture clues and look for the chunks and things like that, which of course is more of your guided reading, but we do know that phonics is important too. There's some more ideas about that. And all right, inferring, using what do you already know, and plus your evidence from the text. And lots of times people will say, well, inferring is reading between the lines. But I was doing this presentation, I came across a little video that a teacher had did, and I didn't download it for you because it's kind of lengthy and I didn't know how to cut it apart and just use the pieces I liked. But anyway, she said that as a child she remembers being in 4th grade and the teacher saying, well, you need to read between the lines, and took the book back to her seat and sat down and, well, what's between the lines? There's white space. I don't understand this at all. So I think us saying read between the lines to kids, poop, that's not going to work very well. And I guess a more better way to do that is to get them to stop and just think about what's happening in their story, or trying to process what the author is trying to tell them. It's because if you're reading between the lines, you're not going to figure out what that means. So communicate to them that it's just a process of learning and it needs to be developed for them to get better. So if you're doing reading, doing inferring correctly, you're going to use clues from the text and what you already know. What did you know about the world already, or what kind of facts do you already know? And sometimes that will change because of your inferring. I thought this was a kind of a neat thing I wish I had done with my kids. Just like the teacher just brought in a bag and started pulling things out. And why do you think I have this in my purse? Why do you think I have this in my purse? Why do you think I have this? So the kids were inferring, doing a lot of inferring about why those items are in her bag, which then could be turned, back into how text, what we read in text, why is that? Why did the author write it like that? Or is that piece of information in that story? Or why did the character do that? Well, it doesn't tell me exactly, but I think. And then we have evaluate. So we want to use that strategy during and after. This is when you're forming some opinions as a reader. You're deciding, was that story a good story, or thumbs up or thumbs down? Will it affect my life anyway? Do I like the way the author wrote that? I mean, we know now as adult readers, you may tend to gravitate toward different genres better, or different authors that you've enjoyed a book that they have ever had written that you've read before. Is that going to give me the information I want? We're evaluating and are reading all the time. So those are the different ones here on the sheet then, anyway, to kind of get your brain thinking about what comprehension strategies, the big ones are that we need to teach what a strategy is versus a skill. And I've just found the Sierra Harris has a blog or two, and she has some good things out there as well. And what she did was she said this is her way that she teaches comprehension skills or strategies to her class. So it's a 5-day process. So first she exposes them to it, by just doing a read aloud or doing something to show them the new skill or strategy. Then step 2, they do some analyzing of it. What are we going to need to know in order to do that? Skill or strategy. And then the third day, they look at strong examples of it and weak examples of it, like right and wrong answers for that strategy or skill. And how could we improve those answers? What steps are missing? And this is all, that the kids haven't applied it yet. And then the fourth day, they're going to prepare to use the strategy. She might give them a partial completed strategy where they might evaluate and do part of the strategy, or anyway, start getting time to practice it and applying it and give them some support for it still. And then finally, letting go and having them complete the skill or strategy on their own. And so it's just that gradual release of responsibility, I guess, I think is kind of like the best way of teaching. So this kind of, for me, I guess, took me some time to look through it and process exactly how she was doing all those things, but it was really good thinking for me of how she was letting those steps be taught. Another fun way to use, another one is like alpha boxes, where you just give them a sheet with the ABCs in boxes, and they come up with a word or a picture for each one of those beginning letters about this text that they've read. For older kids, they could definitely write one word, and if you're doing a science or something, they could definitely write in a lot more. Like this was a social studies lesson, living and working in the city. So they came up with, money, market, producers in a plan, consumers, currency, community, lots and lots of vocabulary to help them fit their comprehension, their learning. And this also is a very interesting website, which I just came across as I was doing this presentation, this ESU for strategies. So if you go and look over here, they have, it's with Marzano is teaching a lot of it, but they have a whole huge plethora of different activities, ideas. If you're wondering to know more about working with what base partner groups are, or what closed procedure is, or comparing answers, you just click and they'll give you a really good description. Well, that one just has comments, so I didn't pick a good one. Anyway, lots of them will show you, or ideas, more ideas that you can use too. So lots and lots of ways. This one is for vocabulary terms, and math facts can be used with it too, using a ball toss. Anyway, just lots of things to get your brain thinking of different things you can use in your room. 2-word strategy, I think, is a really good one too. Just picking out 2 words that are important to the book. I'm sorry that picture came out so blurry, but it's just the 2 words, and then the bottom, having them write some sentences explaining why they chose those 2 words to describe that story or text. And there's back to my 4 square, which I talked about a bunch already, but you can use that for lots and lots and lots of things. All right, so I didn't put this to click on because it was on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I figured, that's my login. If you know what I mean, we put the URL address. So anyway, if you want these posters, I think this is the one. There's 6 posters that have 6 of the strategies on it. You can download those for free, and I know that you can find tons and tons of that kind of stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers. But I was going to say, if anybody wants these, at the end, I'm going to have them for a giveaway. And then here's some neat other ones too, like making connections, making inferences, which you could fill this out with your kids, you know, some different, or run them off and use them for graphic organizers for them to have as well. I think these are good ones. And I also thought that I use this a lot in my room for like morning meeting, or when we had new math program or new reading programs and things like that I wanted to know, I'd make cards and put them on a ring so I could have them real quick and handy and fast for me, like flip through and something I was supposed to remember or wanted to teach. I thought this was here we'll send you to that. They have comprehension strategies. And then the fun thing about it is with these, with our littles, they were relating them to like a Beanie Baby or whatever. I used to do that with phonics in my room. If you've all seen that? I'm not sure. It was pretty popular for a while. That you have like eagle eye, you have an eagle because you need to look carefully at the text. Stretchy snake, you have to stretch out the letter sounds. Frog was for skip it and come back to it later. Lips the fish, get your lips ready to say the first sound. I used to have those around my big bulletin board, my reading bulletin board and stuff for phonics. So I think that would fit really good in with the phonics work and stuff that a lot of you are really, really into now. And then these, of course, are the comprehension animals that you could use with kids for that. So they have got like text to tiger and predicting panda, and it's kind of cute ways for them to remember. Plus it ends up being an anchor chart for your room too. And I thought these were pretty neat bookmarks, and I happened to find in my files I had a set ran off that I never cut apart, and so if anybody wants them, they're going to be for a giveaway too today. But you can go to this winged one and you can download them, and they're pretty nice. And if you don't want it to be sticky note superpowers, because of course you've probably all seen that where you use sticky notes for the kids as they're reading to make little notes or jot a little question or pop it right in their book, or have them use sticky notes as you're having them do different comprehension strategies so that they are ready to say something when it's time to talk about their reading and things like that. Sticky notes are good supports for that. And just always reminders about what good readers do. I think when students are actively reading or comprehending, they're applying multiple reading strategies as they read. They're able to understand the text at a deeper level. So if we think about teaching these strategies versus just skill all the time, we're going to get more meaning and thought going on in our room. And then this is a place where you can look up some centers. And then nonfiction are really the same, but they do add in there, determine some importance, and then like synthesizing the information into what do you want to know from the piece, because or what is the author trying to tell us from the piece, for that too. And there's just some other fun crafties that you can do. Oh, and I showed you those. So there's where you can get those for free. And this Dabbling Mama, she has some fun body movement ways that you could teach comprehension. And I won't go through all those, but just got like finding different paths, and you can click on other things that she does. So I think that's kind of neat, using more of their kinesthetic learning as well. So I gotta use my arrow. Nope. 500 tabs open up here. And there's more cards. Another ring. And then also thought Linda Hoyt, instead of using like saying reading partners, is thinking partners. You're thinking partners when you come together. And I thought that was kind of a neat term, kind of to click it over in the kids' brains. We're not just reading, we're thinking. And then there's something else to think about. Is K through second, is it learning to read? And 3 to 6 is reading to learn? Or are we doing both of those all the time? I think in the olden day, it used to be thought of like this. K through 2 are just learning how to read, and 3 to 6 are learning to read, reading to learn, but I don't think we can think about it that way anymore. What do you think? You know, you're finding you're having to go back and do some phonemic awareness or phonics skills in your 4th and 5th grade rooms, and yeah. Anyway, that's my rambles on comprehension. So thank you. All right, maybe kind of funny doing motivation the last part of the day, but we get motivated to get through it, right? Finish up. And of course for me, for doing 2 talks here in a row, but that's okay. I found this cute visual I thought was kind of neat. So the motivation for reading, is it because I read because I love it? Or I read because I have to? So we want, of course, our kids to love the heart instead, because they have to, that they love it. So why is it important? Well, it is definitely the driving force that makes a person want to read, or makes a person want to do anything. When you're motivated to read, they're more likely to pay attention, more likely to comprehend the information that's being presented. So we need to have some motivation to read, not just because we have to. Of course, if you start studying the research of motivation, they do a lot of talk about how there's 2 types of motivation, which I know we've all heard of. And you can say it with me. We have intrinsic, which is inside of us. And that's the hardest one to pull out, to make important for kids and people. And we have extrinsic motivation, which of course is our rewards and our positive feedbacks and prizes and things like that. But you think about it, a lot of our adult life, for a lot of adults, really is extrinsic. You work for your paycheck, a lot of jobs. I'm not sure that's true in teaching so much. We probably have more intrinsic reason to be a teacher, to get our paycheck. But it's moving up though, it's getting better. But I'm saying we work for the weekend. That's kind of intrinsic, extrinsic at the same time, but different things motivate us to do different things. And I think a lot of intrinsic is just like, it's just, if it's your passion, which makes me think about the first place that I like to start with kids to try to get them interested in reading is to think about their intrinsic motivation. What makes them tick? What do they like? Do they like dinosaurs? Do they like the ocean? Do they like sewing with their grandma? Whatever. Are they in wrestling? Or they want to be a cowboy when they grow up? So I know lots of my kids, I would spend lots of time doing interviews with them, have them fill out papers about what their favorites are and all that at the beginning of the year, tell you about me, hang them out in the hall, have them at open house, all those kinds of things to start to get me to know them so I could figure out their passion. I think if you can get them hooked on something that they want to read about, you can really, really hook some kids. And I know I had a little boy who only wanted to be a cowboy. That's all he ever thought about, breathed, ate, anything. And did I have any cowboy books in my classroom? No. But I quickly found some. So that year I was always looking for cowboy books, but we found plenty for him. Our research also tells us that the 4 keys of motivation in the reading process are that we need to have confidence that we are a reader. And I think that one right there is probably almost number 1 for a lot of our kids who are strugglers. They don't feel that they have confidence. But if we can give them those texts that are 90 to 93% of their reading level, of those decodable books and things that are their level, and it's okay. And I can remember many times my lower students saying and getting so excited, I read that whole book, I read that book. And they would keep it in their book box for weeks and weeks and weeks. And that's probably happened to some of you or even older kids, a book that I read it. And they felt great that they read it. And so I think it was a good thing that we moved away from like whole text to more individual reading. And I notice now at some schools it's kind of going back to the whole text again, but they're decodable text, so maybe that's will make it easier. But they need to have a confidence that they can do it. They need some autonomy or some control. Maybe it could just be that this is where I like to sit in the reading circle, or this is where my spot is in the room to read. I like to be hidden away from people, or I like to be not so far away from my friend, but far enough away to focus and work. But give them some autonomy or some control with that. Might be something simple as that. Or interest and value. We talked about that. You got to get them they're interested and relate. They can relate to it. They can relate to reading. Find out. I think about that as why do we need to read? I remember doing that at the end of the year, making a big chart paper and why do you need to learn how to read? And they could come up with lots and lots of ways that you do need to know how to read in the adult world. Or sometimes I would send home a survey with the parents and ask them to write down, tell us ways that you use reading in your everyday, or math as well too. I remember doing math ones too. So we'll start out with 10 ways to motivate, and this is that Sierra Harris again. I like to kind of follow her blogs, and she goes through 10 unique ways that we can support them. So I'm not going to read every word here, but find out why they don't like to read. Is it too hard? Is it boring? They haven't found a topic that interests them. There aren't any books on that topic that interest them. Figure out what it is, why they don't want to do the reading, and there might be lots of reasons behind that. Are you matching the books? Are they competent in that book? Can they actually read that book with some support? Is it at their right level? And then, like she's doing some surveying there with them, finding out about them as a reader. Check if they're using, some of the skills that you're teaching. Might be because they can't connect, because it's meaningless to them. They're not making those visualizations in their mind. They're not picturing it. They're not doing that movie in their head. Does it make sense? Are they connecting it to their life too? Another real good key one, I think, for a lot of struggling readers is if you focus on nonfiction. And I don't necessarily think that needs to be boys versus girls. Lots of times when this information was first coming out, I know when I was teaching several years back, it was all like, boys love nonfiction, boys are into nonfiction. I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I don't like to read Harlequin romances and stuff. I read nonfiction, and I've always been that way. So why are we always just saying boys like nonfiction? No, I think it's anybody can be a nonfiction reader more than a fiction reader. But sometimes in our younger grades, we have lots and lots and lots of fiction stories. But I think that's where we have gotten better through the years, that teachers increased their nonfiction library and kind of started to hook more of those reluctant readers, because if you're reading a nonfiction book, you're reading it for a reason. You're going to learn something from it, not just a fun, fluffy story. Book talks, I think, are awesome way. You can do those really quickly. We do them sometimes if we are done with something a few minutes before recess. You knew the kids in your room, Ariel, pull out your book. Tell us about the book that you were reading today. What book are you reading? And just having kids talk about the different books that they read. Or as a teacher, you get that Scholastic book box comes in and you bought some free books with your bonus points for your classroom. Don't just throw them in your library. Stand up and pull them out of the box. Present them to them, make it a big deal. We got this gift of new books, and talk about a book talk quick about what that book's about. Even if you haven't read it, if it's brand new out of the box, you can tell them, look at the back cover. And then you're modeling for them how they can look at books and find out what they're about too. But celebrate books, I guess. And then I love this one, and I thought, yeah, I did that quite a bit. Read what they read, and especially if you're doing your guided reading groups with chapter books, sometimes it's a little bit hard to keep abreast of them. You got to keep ahead of them if it's a new book you haven't read before. But yeah, read what they read, or just know what is kind of hot in the culture to read. Go to the bookstore, walk around them and see what different books are there. You don't have to buy them all, but know that graphic novels are a big thing, and Dork Diaries and Wimpy Kid and Kit Kat books and Pete the Cat and all those other ones are kind of the popular books everybody wants to read now. And still some of our old favorites, of course, too. And then this was mentioned this morning. Setting goals can be very, very powerful. So kids know what they're working towards with the reading. It might just be a number of books that your class is going to read, or you're going to read one book from each genre, or you can come up with all kinds of things for that. Have some challenges. And it's kind of the same as number 7, I guess, in my mind. We had school-wide challenges. Bob was really, really good with that. Of course, when he was the principal, that was the time of AR reading, where you read books and took tests on the computer. And they got kind of a bad rap because their questions were not real in-depth comprehension type questions. But I will tell you, they let you know if the child read the book or not. Because they would ask really specific small questions on those AR tests. But he was good about having class or school challenges. We'd work towards popcorn parties and movie days and extra recesses, all kinds of things like that if we did certain things tied to our reading. I always loved to do, I had Tiger Paws for behavior motivation whole class wide. Sometimes I did it individual too, but our whole class system was if we got a compliment from myself or from other teachers in the hall or whatever, we get a Tiger Paw, and then I'd have them generate a list of things that they wanted to do, and I always have my idea, something we could do too. And a lot of times the kids would choose that they wanted to watch a movie over like the read aloud book that I had read aloud. Like, so we watched Charlotte's Web, or we watched Pippi Longstocking, or but sometimes you got to watch it, because I knew one year the kids wanted to watch Mr. Popper's Penguins when that came out, and then I watched Mr. Popper's Penguins, and no, we're not going to watch Mr. Popper's Penguins in school. And I feel that was quite appropriate. They changed the book, total. If you've ever read Mr. Popper's Penguins and seen the movie, it's very different. So just be careful with that. But I think tying, some of your fun times to books is a good way to celebrate and motivate kids to read too. And then just having that talk time, talking with other readers. What are you reading? Why do you like that book? I recommend this book. You've seen those things where you can fill out sheets and have them, they can stick it in the book and put it back in the library, and the kids can pull them out and read a few words that one of their friends said this is a great book because of why, and we'll get them motivated maybe to read that book too. And then I think this one should actually be number 1. Read aloud daily, because if you do any of a reading research, that always comes up to be so much number 1. And sometimes I think in our busy days, you can get in that habit as a classroom teacher that's kind of your extra thing that you do. But I would highly promote that you make that 10-15 minute time. It only has to be that long of your day consistent, and you consistently do read aloud with your kids. And I don't mean that for like starting your lessons in the short books, but I mean like a chapter book that they're not seeing the pictures, and even for our littles, and they're visualizing and they're doing that comprehension. They're listening to you as you think and read and talk at the same time about what you're reading and monitoring your comprehension. And I would always celebrate, definitely big time, that Read Aloud book. Had a special book holder stand that the Read Aloud book sat in. I had changed out the different bookmarks that were in it. The kids would even pay attention to that, and just kind of a cute way just to keep them motivated that we're reading that. Yeah.
Something I did this year, I just thought it was going to be something simple, but the kids loved it. Every time I finished reading, whether it was a picture book or a chapter book to the class for story time, I picked a different kid, sat them down, they held the book and they took their picture. So I had it all over the front of my desk. Everybody was up there,
holding up one of the important books.
I took them home at the end of the year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
It was kind of nice because parents would come in the room or whoever, and they would know, oh, you read, Journey of Edward Tulane or whatever.
And what a quick way to do it too. Just a picture. That's awesome. Love that idea.
It was just fun.
I've seen in rooms, maybe more so for the olders, they'll do like social type books and photograph the cover of them and have them, as they read them, they'll put them up around their room or things like that too. But yeah, just as another way to keep them motivated. All right. Whoops. How far did I go there? Okay, that was right. All right. And of course, celebrating their progress. Of course, celebrating goals that they make, celebrating that they read that book. They read another new book today, or send notes home to parents. Those are so important. Can be very, very, very positive. Share the successes with another teacher. You know that so and so had, Mrs. Kaus last year, and have her come and say, I heard that you read, a certain book or whatever. Or you get, your teacher was telling me about how you're doing this year. And stickers and a class-wide cheer, and that's kind of a fun thing. You can come up with something for your room. Bob was great about that. We had school-wide little songs that the kids would learn, and I'm sorry to say I can't say any of them off the top of my head, but I think maybe one was like to the tune of Achy Breaky Heart, like reading is so cool, and and all that, and things like that. You switch around the words, or take a poem and change it up, or fun things. Have the child call the parent if you can. Permission. For some parents, of course, you can't do that at work, but you can. You could have a sheet, maybe at the beginning of the year they could just check off. It's okay if I get a call at work for positives from my child throughout the day. You don't want to call them every day, but once a month or something, they could make a phone call about something that they did was great in reading. I think displays are great ways to show their progress. They're moving up, and in writing, personal notes or little jots in their reader notebooks and things like that can definitely get kids motivated. Another way, of course, you've all heard about having reading buddies. That can be somebody from the community. It could that comes once a week or something. You could even partner up with like your nursing home and go there once a month. Spencer recently, and I got to help with that, had a bunch of residents come in from assisted living and read a book to different classrooms. They just changed out, and they were there for about an hour. It's a neat thing. We used to do reading buddies with older kids, but then when we went to grade alike, that was impossible. So we just did reading buddies with a next door room that were the same age of peers. But the two teachers would get together to set them up, so they weren't like way far into the spectrum of reading abilities, but kind of close, but yet have a stronger reader and one that needs a little more help. And we ran off poetry books, phonics poetry, really. And they practiced those with them once a week for 20 minutes on Fridays. That was really a fun motivator for a lot of kids. They look forward to doing that. We'd do one together as a class, and then the rest of the time they got to just pick and choose whichever poems they wanted to read with their reading partner. And of course, reading, keep it fun. Ultimately, we want kids to be strong readers so they can read for pleasure. Learning and enjoyment are the two main goals for readers as adults. I think a lot of times, a lot of adult readers turn into just they do it for learning. A lot more of that nonfiction, but they still sell plenty of fun books too for grown-ups. Let them choose their own books or topics from time to time. Maybe something that they want to study. Set up your room, I guess, in a way that promotes that you may think that reading is important. So you can see like my little posters up here, or some of my favorites. Open a book and you fall in, or books are always your best friend, and just have those kinds of things just incidentally around your room, but really they're there for a purpose. I mean, they're intentionally put there for kids. This one is more of a kind of more academic article about reading motivation to kind of give you some more ideas if you want to get into it depth a little bit more. About where can you start, and they give you some different websites and things that you can go to too if you want some more thoughts or ideas on that. And this room kind of would make, I know some of those minimalist people freak out a little bit, but yet for me it's like, oh, wow. Sorry it looks so blurry. I guess because I enlarged the picture. But anyway, all these books here to the side are in like little holders and stuff. And so you can see they're just immersed in all of that reading material, and definitely I think know that reading is important in that classroom. This is a fun site that has some of those motivating songs and videos that you can use. I think there's 26 of them down here. I won't let them all load, but this one was pretty neat. I forgot. You asked me if I was going to show a video or not. I forgot. I do have a couple little videos here, but and it's okay. It's just some music, so you don't really need the sound, but. Isn't that fun? Your brain just watches and watches the rainbow. I think about how they did that. Oh my gosh. Anyway, goes on just a little bit more, but you can see you want like making that a book be kind of a thing of wonder, I guess, in bookstores and bookshelves. I I won't show these two because I forgot about that. So we didn't set up speakers, but it's okay. But you can have fun looking through here and all of the different reading motivation videos. So there's some that the kids, middle school, the first one's the middle school kids are doing one of those songs together that somebody created about reading, and there's more of those on here too. Oops. Okay, we're going to turn it all blue. There we go. I want to highlight it all. And there's our good friend LeVar Burton. There's a neat one about reading there. And this one's pretty funny because it starts out that this person is inventing something. They don't know what it is. And he's just so smart, he can make anything. And anyway, ends up being this bookmobile car, and he actually goes throughout his small town. I think it's, I'm not sure where it is. It's like maybe somewhere South America anyway, and distributing free books to people just on the promise that they will read it. So he gives them to adults and kids as well. And another thing I think to think about with motivation is we need to also be careful about when we give praise. I didn't put the microphone back on, did I? I'm sorry. Another thing about motivation that we should think about is about how we give praise to kids. We want to make sure that we're giving positive reinforcement, and that it's not taken in a, can be taken in a negative way. It can become a downer instead of a motivator. I'm not going to get rid of all those, am I? Anyway, this is a very nice article about effective words that you can use for kids to increase their self-esteem and improve their motivation. How you want to be specific with your words, praise them honestly and sincerely. Don't just make something up. Much better, instead of just saying good job, to be specific about what you're saying good job about. You get a good job of finding the, like your skills you're working on, the cause and effect of that story, or you did a good job of your reading comprehension, summarizing that. Don't praise them on their achievement or their ability. When they get that intrinsic motivation more, we teach kids to be, more resilient. They won't crumble away. So what a smart boy. Well, that doesn't really give them a whole lot of information, but if you can say, I see that you worked really hard on putting those pieces together, of that puzzle, that's a lot more specific and intrinsic motivator than just saying that you're smart. So there's just kind of some of those things just to think about is that we've learned as teachers, and there's quite a lot more on this website about that too. And so they say that these three things affect learning: our memory, our attention, and our motivation. So you can see that's very, very important to learning. And motivation is the hardest one to teach. And then I thought this was interesting. We talk about reading. Back in 1999, the Reading Excellence Act had those 6 components of what teachers needed for reading. And motivation was number 6. And then when the reading panel report came out, then a year later, they shortened it, to the 5 that we can rattle off. Hopefully you can. Phonemic and your phonics and your fluency and your vocabulary and your comprehension. But they didn't put the motivation over there. So I thought that was kind of interesting comparison to think about how, don't forget about that. We can get kind of wrapped up in our science part, but we still need to motivate. There's just some more things you can think about. Kathy Gansky talked a lot when she was at our school about trying to get kids excited about just words, not even just about books. So if you can get them to play around with words, point out similarities, differences about words, research word history. One thing I used to do in my room, we did homophones, and I make a great big chart. Well, I had this roll of newsprint that was this long, wide, excuse me, and I would pull it out and hang it and then up, and we'd start writing homophones, you know, sun in the sky, and you are your dad's son, and those kinds of things. And we'd make a big list, and pretty soon the paper would get longer and longer and longer, and by the end, then we didn't do this in one day. I mean, it was like months. We'd extend it and go all the way across the ceiling. And that was a really big, huge, like, eye-opener for a lot of kids. Like, dang, this reading thing is hard. Because look at all these words that you say the same way, but they're spelled differently. Kind of mind-boggling. And I wouldn't let them go home and Google the list and download it from the computer either. They had to come with handwritten, like a few every day if they wanted to add it to the list. Or so we'd be reading along and someone would go, "That's a homophone." We quick jot it onto the piece of paper. So that was a really good motivator. And I know you can do that with lots and lots of your phonics words and things like that, or phonics sounds and things that we do. Yeah. And I like this one. So C.W. Lewis, for Children's Lit, said, "A children's story which is enjoyed only by children is a bad children's story." So you think about it. If you like it, you enjoy it, probably the kids are going to too. If you think it's kind of boring, they also are going to think it's not good. So a good children's story is not only enjoyed just by kids. And just think about literature has that literary art form, there's visualization, in it, and powerful genres which communicate messages about our human experience. So you just don't want to forget those books. So here's some things I did that at the time I did them. I didn't really think about them as reading, but I was out at Dell's Garden Center one year and found a praying mantis and brought that in my room, and you would not believe all of the reading and learning and comprehension building and things we got out of that little insect, because their excitement for it and their motivation to want to learn about it was just overabundant, and kids would want to stay in for recess so they could research about the praying mantis. Another one is a Venus flytrap. That was another one that sparked the kids' interest totally. They wanted to study that, and it was just things that we did on our free time or when your work was done, because we did have our curriculum to do too. There's just kind of my room, and you can see over there I had bookshelves that were like pencils. I still have them. I'm going to pass them on to my grandson, but I kind of look back now. I was looking through my pictures, like, gosh, she really didn't take very good pictures of your room. But this was a project we did every year. We had open house, but the last few years I taught, we didn't have an open house. But that's a paper plate person they did about themselves, and we see a little All About Me book sitting there. And this had a whole body too that they stuck into the chair. So I always teased with them they never left school, and that the kids were, they're reading while they were gone. Another fun thing I found when looking through my pictures, one time the kids were talking about authors and trying to get them motivated, I guess more so in a way to read, but I can also see the tie-in with, to write, but also the tie-in with reading, because they're so interchanged and hand in hand. But they came up with things that I could write a book about. So that was kind of fun. I think it's funny on here, conflicts. Yeah, I probably could write a book about children's conflicts. How to be nice to people. Put it side by side there. How to plan things. So it's just kind of cute, their take on what I could write a book about. But, that too, what you can see, ask them that, and then you can kind of get more of a idea about what is their passions. This is what they thought some of my passions were. And the last year I taught was in a pandemic. Yes, so there's the class. Desks all far apart, and And there's one of my students that would say, and do things incidentally, so like here's a, Spencer is big on books, and that was one year we did it quite a few years when RIF was going through our school, but now there's different programs for books. But anyway, our Spencer has adopted Literacy Partners, I think it's called, instead they don't do it through RIF, but they had a poster contest, and anyway, she won, little girl in my room. Stephanie Elliott was her name, but that's not related to me. That poster at the top where that little girl sitting on top of all those books. And then this one is one my daughter made, Reading is Tigerific, and the librarian always had poster contests too for many, many years, and she was one of the winners of that. So, yes, there are decorations in my room, but they were there for intentionally, I guess. And this is just one of my students. She thought she was pretty neat because she was wearing a shirt with, she's reading a book. RBG, but anyway. Yeah, and there's me. I think, you look back, you think about, you can see why maybe our kids don't know their sounds and lots of things because of the pandemic. They really couldn't tell our expressions, could they? Or things like that. And I have asthma, so I needed to wear one of those kind. But anyway, yeah. But we can not look at that. So I just real quick to wrap it up, just have some kind of fun things here. So just some things I use for motivators in my room. So like my library, I always had, the reading buddies, and I didn't just use I had the phonics reading buddies up on little shelves, but I had, like different book characters always, and we had special times where the kids could take one and read with them. But most of the time they were just there for looks, because that just detracts from our work, but it also motivates too. And I think puppets can definitely be a motivator too. That doesn't take a whole lot of time. You can have that with you as you're reading the book. I have the old lady who swallowed a fly. Don't ask me why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. Anyway, those kinds of things were kind of hooks for kids, and they would take those and reenact and retell the story. And now there's just so many of them out there. She swallowed some books, and they've been changing them up to Old Mermaid who swallowed a shark, and and I think having sets of books, like I have probably about 13 or 14 of these, maybe 15, I don't know, of old lady books with a basket, and the kids would go and gravitate toward those, or after we had the puppet out, and they'd read them for a week or two, and then something else would become popular in the room that I introduced. So I think that's a way to really motivate kids too. I don't think it always has to be younger grades, but or think of books that you can tie in with your other subject matter, like Grouchy Ladybug's about telling time, so you can do it in math class, things like that. There's all kinds of books. That would be another whole topic of math books that you could use for reading. And of course, I was always the weird teacher. I always told my kids I told the parents if they came to conferences or open house, and on the page that said "my teacher is," if they put weird, that was supposed to be a compliment instead of a negative. So if they said my teacher is weird, that was good, because I wanted to be the weird teacher. And monarchs is another one of my passions anyway with kids too, but that also tied into lots of reading materials too. But make reading important. I always had this hung outside my door for probably 30 years for parents to read too. The most important 20 minutes of your day is read with your child. And just look around. Scholastic, sometimes those book order things will give you, the book order, and they've got really cool little posters you could cut out and laminate and hang in your room. Lots of, reading freebies sometimes you can get to use for motivators. Another really fun one that I love doing would try to sneak it in even as the times kind of changed with reading, but we weren't so open-ended. But we would do an author book, and so I would teach the kids about, Ezra Jack Keats, and we'd take a photograph. I'd copy a photograph of him, and they would glue it on, or sometimes they have it already printed, and then just a short, where is he born, his age, where does he live, his family, and interesting facts, about different ones. And then I would photocopy some of the books and put that with it. Or this one's Arnold Lobel. I just make a list of books I've read by Arnold Lobel, and this was a huge motivator for a lot of the kids to get it all checked off. That was just another plug to get them to read more and more books. And and also finding like little packets and things like that would have, like, this is Frog and Toad, and so it goes through vocabulary words, and it has synonyms and antonyms, and what else is in here? Yeah, that's about it. Anyway, some sequencing and things that were true and false, and who said it. Did Toad say that sentence, or did Frog say that sentence? So some more character analyzation, and then like a little summary on the back. So just adding some of those into your curriculum. Like this one's for the Where the Wild Things Are. Just have them quick draw their own wild thing. It doesn't have to take you all day to do something to kind of spark that motivation. This one was Leo Liani. Just had him tear paper and cut out, and they made Frederick. But how cool to know that the lady who wrote Amelia Bedelia, she was a second grade teacher, and she didn't have any kids of her own. And then how her nephew Herman Parrish started writing Amelia Bedelia books after she passed away. So just things like that. I just think that was really, really powerful for my kids to know that these authors were real people with families and things. And of course, if I had the chance to meet some of them, like Kevin Hinckus told us that he always used the same red margarine tub for water in it to clean his paintbrush. I mean, just lots of fun little snippets about their regular real life, I think really helped hook my kids into reading. And then I would always have a bulletin board that was our author of the month, or author of the couple weeks, whatever it would be. And then do things like, with Kevin Hinckus, that, chrysanthemum, some of you know that. But kids didn't know what a chrysanthemum was, So if I didn't have a real chrysanthemum, or bring one in, have a picture. It says, this is flower, and build some vocabulary and things like that too. Or do fun things like with chrysanthemum. This was a powerful one. They took home with their parents and, how did I get my name? Why did you name me? How you name me? A lot of parents had never had that conversation with their child yet in second grade. So just some fun things. And then I found as teachers came along, you can find neat author study or author notebook stuff on there too. I'm sorry, I should have put down where I got this one from, but I really liked, they just one short quick page summary and kind of a drawing of the person from what they look like. And then on the back, then there is what common characters does this author write about, what's the big idea or themes that this author writes about, what kind of adventures do these characters have, and how are problems solved. So just another way for them to be thinking about their comprehension as they're reading. Also fun things is like bread and jam for Francis. I remember we made a big class book with a toaster, and the kids wrote a synopsis or something about one of the stories and stuck it inside the toaster. You can come up with all kinds of clever little things like that. Or this was a class book that we made all together about Christopher Columbus, so we were learning about him. And so each partner group worked on a page, and we sequenced the story first. We wrote it together as a class on big chart paper, and then told them what part they're responsible for, the partners, and then they made a little pop-up book. So pop-up books are real easy to make too. You just pull the paper in half and make those little cuts, and then you've got the little stand for them to glue stuff onto. But they made their own. Kind of impressive, huh? They had fun with that. But talk about remembering and the comprehension, and they pulled out Christopher Columbus books and looked it up and things like that too. Or just things like, I think this is My Teacher Were President, maybe was the book, and we're doing voting and stuff. If I were the president, and just tie in your reading and your writing together as much as you can. I think this one, these two, I like to use those. Have you seen those books? It's called Draw and Write Now. I think they're kind of old, but I know that they're republishing them, and it shows you how to do a directed drawing of nonfiction topics, not just draw the cute cat or whatever like that, directed drawing, but like how to draw this pueblo and how to draw mesas. And anyway, so we did that, and then they wrote, sentences, nonfiction sentences from their reading about what they learned with that. Don't forget about things more about tying reading with writing. We used to do the Flat Stanley Project, and the Great Mail Race is another one. Here's some Read Across America poems that we made. Oh, there's that poster. Okay. And give your kids, bookmarks. Doesn't take much to run off bookmarks and stuff like that, just to motivate them. Or I'd even put in my recess cupboard and stuff, book-centered games and book-centered coloring books and things like that, so they're thinking about reading a lot. And then you can even find stuff like this is wrapping paper, but it's Curious George and Clifford, used for a bulletin board, stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be a lot of money that you spend. And then you've always heard of DEAR, drop everything and read. Well, I liked to use this in my room. We called it our star time. So stop, take a book, and read. And then there were special bookmarks and all kinds of things that went along with this as well. But so hope that you have fun with your students and can motivate them, and that they'll want to do star time in your room too. Did anybody have any that they think they wanted to share from your room? I should be better about doing that. I could have stopped about it 50 times. Yeah.
I didn't do this every single week because it would get too old. Like maybe once a month I would do Flashlight Friday. And they bring their flashlights in and we close the blinds. They loved it. And they'd sit there in the dark with their flashlights and read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
They loved it.
Cool.
We've done read and feed, where they bring a snack and get to eat it as they read.
Neat. Yeah, see, just these little things, just little stuff, just to spark them to want to keep coming to school, and don't see reading as that boring class, but I'm reading.
We read is the Unteachables, and so I had the kids dress up in one of the characters at the end of the book, and they were so excited about that.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I hope you keep motivating all of your students and have a wonderful next year.